Hello everyone, this is José with the O3X6 series. And with me, my hermano Tyler Pollock. Today we're joined by an incredibly experienced and accomplished guest, Erik Grohmann. A little bit about Erik. Erik was born and raised in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. He is a former Marine who served with 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. He had a great tenure from 2011 through 2015, during which he deployed to Korea and participated in the 31st and 11th MEU as a team and squad leader. His expertise also extended to guiding indigenous force training. After his service in the United States Marine Corps, Erik embarked on a new journey in the field of nutrition and dietetics. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science from California State University, Long Beach, after which he returned to Wisconsin. There he completed his Dietetic Internship and passed his credentialing exam and officially became a registered dietitian. Erik now operates his private practice, Grunt Grub, where he aids hardworking men in reaching their health and performance goals through evidence-based nutrition coaching. He recently added a Master of Science degree in dietetics to his list of accomplishments. Outside of his clinical and entrepreneurial pursuits, Erik enjoys the outdoors with interest in bow hunting, snowboarding, and endurance running. He also works part-time installing solar panels, combining his love for physical work with a sustainable cause. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Semper Fidelis.
So it's all good.
Yeah, no, I could tell you're super passionate about it. And I think that's awesome because, it is important. But Erik, appreciate you coming on and chopping it up with us.
Absolutely.
Especially us dudes getting kind of majority of like our peer group are in the mid 30s now. So it's kind of like when you start, when things start getting a little more challenging,
Yeah.
especially, if you did, any amount of time, in the infantry will take a toll on your body. So you start having these ailments, like physical things popping up. And like, I know personally in myself, like if I'm kind of shifting and I'm eating poorly, my body hurts, like my joints hurt worse. And I know that's inflammation and stuff, but when I clean it up and like get my stuff together, it's like, man, I feel great. Like I feel great again. And it's, and that's a weird thing. I think so many people aren't like in tune with themselves in that way. Like they don't realize what they did makes them feel bad. And
For sure.
but anyway, before we get into that, like all that, I kind of want to know like your background, how you grew up, what got you into doing this kind of stuff. Obviously your time in the Marines, if you want to touch on that or, wherever you want to go with it, but
For
appreciate
sure.
you coming on, man.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. And I think, on a lot of these podcasts, I always love listening to people's backgrounds, but I think the point of this podcast specifically should be trying to get, spending the most of our time trying to get good information out to the listeners, just so they have like a better understanding when they leave the podcast of like maybe what I should or shouldn't be doing more or less of. So I will go over my background, but I'll try to keep it brief. So if it gets long, just cut me off.
No, whatever you want to do, man. It's yeah, I want to get in the meat and potatoes. And I'm sure we'll get into that. I wasn't trying to be funny, but the nutrition.
No, that was a good pun.
The nutrition part of it, but yeah, just wherever you want to go, man.
Cool, man. Well, born and raised in Wisconsin, around the Milwaukee area. No one in my immediate family was in the military, so going to the Marine Corps was kind of like a weird decision to my family. I mean, I'd say my family's fairly patriotic, but no one ever really served in the military outside of like a distant grandfather. But for me, I've always been like a kid that was into extreme shit. Like my hobbies are like snowboarding. I grew up snowboarding since I was really little, and I was that kid that was doing flips off anything I could find. So I think when I came to the military, it was just like this big adventure to me, I was like, so that adventure seeking side of me paired with my inherent like patriotic side, I guess I got from my parents, it made sense. But I wasn't sure. I wanted to join right out of high school. One of my best friends that's in my peer group, they're a little bit older than me, and he was already in the Marine Corps. So he was in like Iraq when Fallujah went off, and he was at 0311. So I talked to him and I really heeded his advice. And he told me, he goes, dude, I'm all for you going in the Marine Corps, especially infantry. But like one thing I wish I would have done is just like tried college first. So I was like, all right, that makes sense. So I took his advice. Out of everyone else's advice, I took his the most serious. And I went to school for a couple of years before joining the Marine Corps. He goes, you can always join, a couple of years in if you still want to do it. So I went to the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire as a declared nursing major. That lasted like a semester. I took one anatomy class, and I was 18. Like, I was in college to party. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was still thinking Marine Corps. So my first semester, I changed my degree, my like declared degree, to business, just because it seemed like the easiest thing to do at the time. I was like, math classes are, lower. I don't have to take as many science classes. I feel like you could do anything with business. So that's kind of where my head was at. And then after my first year was done, finally decided the Marine Corps was definitely what I wanted to do. So I met with a recruiter, took the ASVAB, did fairly well. So when he asked me what I wanted to do, he goes, don't say infantry. And I said, dude, if you don't give me an infantry contract, I will go to the Army next door and I will get an infantry contract from them guaranteed. Yeah. So I kind of put him on the hot seat, and sure enough, he got me an infantry contract. So that was sweet. I was in delayed entry for a year because I wanted to finish just one more year of school, thinking that in the long term that might help me if I go back to school afterwards, which it didn't. But nonetheless, that's kind of where I was at. So I enlisted out of Minneapolis is where my MEP station was. So I got to go to San Diego for boot camp, Hollywood Marine. So did that, and then I got stationed after infantry school with 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines in Horno, right next door, which was cool. My Marine Corps experience was super weird because it definitely was not what I was expecting at all. Like, when I joined the Marine Corps, I wanted to go out to Afghanistan. I just thought that's what was going to happen. Like, I didn't even think anything outside of that. I also didn't do my due diligence, and I didn't really know what the Marine Corps did. I just figured the Marine Corps infantry was like the most badass shit you could do. Like, you're going to get in it. So I was like, yeah, sign me up. But then in boot camp, you learn about MEUs and shit. And you're like, oh man, like, what? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And sure enough, that's basically what I did, which was like a huge shock to me. So when I got to infantry school and I showed up to my unit, they were a boat company at the time. So like, they just got back from Coronado doing all their training like a week before I dropped into the unit. So the first sergeant comes by SOI, and I was thinking about, I talked to the scout snipers because I was like, I always wanted to do that as a kid. That seems badass. But then this first sergeant rolls up and he's talking about boat company, and he makes it seem like this fucking movie, right? Like, oh, man, we're raiding beaches in the Pacific on these rubber rafts. Like, it's so sick. And I was like, fuck yeah. Like, no way am I doing snipers. Like, I'm staying with boat company, man. This shit sounds sweet. So do that. We go over to Korea for a couple months. Well, it was like a month sail. And then like we spent about 30 days in Korea just training. It was cool. It was kind of like our Bridgeport. And then after that, we did the 31st MEU, which is like a whole thing. I mean, it's basically like being stateside, except you're in Japan. And then you sail around for a little bit. We did some cool training with like the Filipino Marines and their special forces guys. We got to stop in Malaysia. We did a whole bunch of boat training, which was fun, but still training, right?
Yeah.
And then we got back from that deployment. And then at that point, the Marine Corps was kind of like pulling troop down, like the troop numbers down from Afghanistan. So they needed our company to kind of have like a different mission. So our company commander basically decided that he wanted to find a niche for us, and he figured that niche would be embassy reinforcement. So my whole company then trained in embassy reinforcement, and each platoon was designated a different role. So like, one platoon was like the riot control platoon. Our platoon was like the indigenous force training platoon. So we went over to Virginia for this badass course, supposed to be badass course. It was going to have live tissue training, defensive driving, a full foreign weapons package, like every Marine's wet dream, right? Like, I get to shoot RPGs, crash cars, fucking work on fucking pigs and shit. Like, it was awesome. Except right when we were there, the government shutdown happened. And those are all contractors that weren't going to get paid. So all of that got canceled. So we still got to do like Syrian stuff. And we got like some other like mid-level cool courses. But it was kind of a letdown. But learning how to like pick handcuffs and shit's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we got back from that course, and then we went through like a full non-lethal course, so like taser and all that, OC spray, all that fun stuff. And then our last deployment was on the 11th MEU, and really a super boring deployment, to be honest. Like, we were kind of floating off the coast of Yemen, and we didn't know if we were going to go have to reinforce their embassy or like kind of float closer to Kuwait and then go reinforce the Iraq embassy. Both of them were hot at the time, but nothing ended up being like detrimental. We spun up one time because the SEALs were doing a raid in Yemen and we were supposed to be the backup force, but they never called us in. So kind of just sat around. And then on our way back, like the deployment was coming to an end, we were sailing back. The Yemen embassy got overran and they sent in a different freaking unit to go like bolster that embassy. So my morale at that point in the Marine Corps was extremely low. Like, I had this idea that I was going to go to Afghanistan, right, and do all these things. And like that didn't end up happening. And to me, that was super hard to deal with for a really long time, you know, because like that's just my expectation was so vivid. And when the reality didn't meet that, it was like a major letdown. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get out of the Marine Corps. At that time, I had just gotten married. And then I got out and I was like, well, shit, now, like, what do I do now? You know, like that was a letdown. Is whatever I'm going to do next going to be let down? I don't know. But I was super lucky that when I first got out of the military, I met these people at my local community college. Like, they found me and they basically recruited me to go to their community college, and their veteran center was outstanding. Like, I cannot thank them enough. They helped me get all my GI Bill stuff signed up for. They helped me sign up for classes. Like, I don't think I could have done it without them. Like, they were there to help me, you know, every step of the way. And I think that topic itself could be a whole podcast, right? It's just like veterans first getting out and learning how to navigate, you know, going to school and transitioning into civilian life, because it's not easy for everybody. And I feel like I was okay at it, but it wasn't super easy. It wasn't a seamless transition to go from such a like testosterone driven environment back into the real world. Like, I blew up on kids in class a couple times, you know, like I dropped some words that probably they've never heard before, you know, like 18-year-old kids living in Irvine. But I got some stories from school. But I started as a business major when I got out of the military, and that lasted like a couple weeks. And then I was like, you know what, man, like I'm more mature now. I feel like I got better direction. So I changed from business to civil engineering because I was like, I'm good at math and science, and I know that's going to give me a fat paycheck. And I made it 2 years in civil engineering, and I got accepted to the University of California, Irvine for civil engineering. And I was in a status class one day, and this dude sitting next to me, I was like, hey man, how was your weekend? He was like, oh, great, dude. Like, I taught myself how to code and like use all these engineering programs, and he had a blast. And you could just tell he was going to be an awesome engineer. And he's like, what'd you do? And I was like, oh man, I was at the beach. I was surfing. Like, I worked out. I prepped all my food for the week, like standard weekend, right? Great weekend for me. But then I was like, man, you're going to be an awesome engineer, and I'm going to be a very mediocre engineer because my heart is just not in like I'm in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spend the majority of my adult life doing a job I don't love. So that's when I decided to kind of follow my passions and go into nutrition. So I finished my undergrad at California State Long Beach in nutrition. And then after you graduate, to become a dietitian, you have to do like a residency. So it's a year-long program roughly, and you can apply wherever they're at. So there's several in Southern California. There were several back home in Wisconsin. So me and my wife just basically had to decide, you know, where do we want to end up? Because where I do my internship, I'll probably get a job right after that, and you get connections through your internship. So we ultimately decided to move back home to Wisconsin. As much as I miss Southern California, you know, our family's here, cost of living's a lot cheaper. So did my internship out here, and then right away got a job at the VA as a clinical dietitian, and then kind of started my business in the meantime.
Nice. Yeah, I saw that in your bio, and I was like, that's interesting. That's the first time I ever heard like that they had services like, you know, like that in the VA. And I want to kind of get into what you do or how they implement you there.
For sure.
You know, but so just to backpedal a little bit, and I know we don't want to focus too much on that, but I'm just curious, did 2-1 when you arrived there, did they go to OEF?
So their last deployment that they got back for before they went to boats and all that was Afghanistan. So they had just gotten back. So like my seniors were all over there.
That was
Right.
2011, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, when
Yep.
when when 28 was there in 2011, we were in the outskirts of Marja District, a place called Karizi Sayidi. 21 was around that time, and it was like kind of, well, there was an incident that took place where it like impacted the entire area of operations. Like, it was a bad situation.
With 2-1.
Yeah, I believe it was, there was a hazing incident that took place on post. Guy kept falling asleep, and I guess either one, the guy checked out, or either I think the guy checked out, and so like it came down and like it impacted. And that's the only reason why I know 2-1 was overseas 2011.
Because they did something fucked up.
Yeah, well, dude, I mean, well, you know how it is. I mean, operations
Yeah.
people, if you're standing post, man, it's hard for young guys. And we were, I don't know, I don't want to get too much into it, but whenever we were coming through, if you fall asleep on post, you're like the biggest piece of shit ever.
Oh, for sure.
But at the same time, too, whenever like I was sergeant of the guard or something like that, I told my guys, like, look, man, if you're falling asleep, you need to radio in so that I can come and relieve you, so that we can keep fluidity going, so that it doesn't become an issue, rather than
Absolutely.
you better not fall asleep or else. You know, I'd rather have
Absolutely.
a functional guy. But yeah, that's the only reason why I know. Also, too, whenever there was a one of our platoons from 2-8, it was like a ragtag group that got sent over to Yemen that was there during the that whole situation at the embassy.
Really?
That was in 2012, I believe, right? 2012, 2013.
It would have been 2014. It would have been like an end of 2014 or super early 2015. Because I got out in June of 15. And I mean, I got out like a couple months after we got back. So it was probably like end of 2014. But I mean, the Yemen embassy was popping off for a while. There was like several
Yeah,
incidents, which is why we were over there in the first place. But I mean, it was just such a blow to your motivation to be like, our whole mission the past like 2 years was to train for that mission. And then it happens, like exactly what we trained for happens, and they send somebody else in. It was like, and I mean, obviously, you know how it is. Like the Marine Corps has the Marine Corps needs, and they make decisions that are way over our heads. And it probably
yeah,
made sense at the time strategically. But like for the guy on the ground, that it's like, I mean, I could use every analogy in the book, right? Sit on the bench, never playing a real game. Like all of that, like that all hit you at once. And then it was just like, what am I even doing here, man? Like, I just feel useless, you know? I mean, I've come around to my like Marine Corps situation now. I'm older, wiser, right? Like, thankful that I'm still here, got all my limbs, all my buddies made it, you know, like there's a lot of positives, and that's just the way it was, right? Like that
yeah.
was the hand I got dealt, and I deal with it. But when I was young and like, you know, 21, 22, and you just want to fucking get some, like you're just like, oh man, this sucks. Like, I
Yeah.
can't believe I didn't get over there. And it's like, you know, I mean,
Yeah, dude. It's completely out of your control. And we've talked about that before, you know, especially with guys in now and stuff. And it's like, man, you can't really dictate what's gonna happen. Something could pop off now and you could go have the ride of your life for better or worse. And it's
for
like,
sure.
no, we don't get to choose. So there's no, I know there's a lot of like ribbing each other about who did what and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
it's really like none of us are in control of any of that. It's all
Yeah.
bullshit. You know, you're just so, but no, it's cool. And we've talked about too, like that boat training sounds sick as fuck, dude. I would like love to do that. We didn't get to do anything like that. It was just running the ranges, prepping to go, and then go. We didn't get to do any of the fun stuff.
The
We didn't go
maritime
on
interdiction.
MEUs.
Yeah.
We didn't do nothing like that. So it's like, there's
Oh,
ups and downs to all of it. So
absolutely, right. And the grass is always greener on the other side. Like back then, if you would have said like you could trade all of your Marine Corps experience you're about to have to like go over there right now, I would have said yes, you know. But then you get out and you're like, all right, well, like I mean, I did do some cool stuff that like the true Marine nature of being amphibious
yeah,
is, and it's like cool. Like I got to play a role in that and like experience that, and it was great, you know. Like there's always going to be things that you didn't have that you want, I guess. And I guess as you get older, you realize that more and more just about life in general. So it makes like coping with what you didn't get to experience easier for sure.
yeah,
You know, you
right
kind of
on.
just take it as what it is.
Yeah, on the other side of that spectrum too, man, I get a lot of guys that tell me, it's like, oh, you didn't get your degree while you were in. And I was like, what? You
Yeah.
got a degree when you were in? I didn't have time. It's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, dude, no way. Any infantry role, like there's no way. There's just too much training, too many schools, you're out in the field. Like, I mean, I don't know what it would like. I don't know what it would be like to have a normal Marine Corps job that's not infantry related, where it's like every single night you're guaranteed to like get out at a certain time and you have like dedicated time.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been sweet. Although at that age, I don't even know if I would have had the discipline in me to like go to school,
Right.
you know, because like that just wasn't where I was at in my life. Like I was there to hang with the boys and party and like do bad shit and fucking go to the gym and work out. Like that was my whole life. And like that's all it was going to be at that time.
Yeah, and I think, getting kind of back onto the topic, I think that's what's interesting because coming into this, like I was like, oh, this guy, because you had guys in the unit that were like their lives were regimented outside of work. Like you'd be done training, these guys are in the gym, they're eating. They're like Jose was one of those guys, dude. He's constantly PTing 24/7 around the clock. You could know you like you would wake up before formation in the morning. Jose would be running back from his run.
Jose Goggins.
Yeah, like that's what he was. That's what he was doing. But like, I thought this whole, nutrition and, stuff you were interested in was going to be what pushed you into pursuing that as a career. And it really wasn't.
No, and to be honest, like my diet in the Marine Corps wasn't ideal. And like I listened to a lot of bro science. Like I was never good at like doing my own research. Like I would just trust somebody that looked good. I'd be like, this guy clearly knows what they're doing. Like, tell me whatever you're doing, and I'm going to do that. So like, luckily I had my first squad leader was, his nutrition knowledge was like, okay. So like he actually kicked us a couple nutrition classes, like what we should and shouldn't eat. And I had some level of understanding, but I didn't know the insides and outs of like macronutrients, micronutrients, what they do. I mean, I was 2 scoops of pre-workout. I was like, Marlboro Red and a Zions in the morning for breakfast. And then, like during class or out, I'd have, a Grizz wintergreen in my lip, like always. That, I mean, it was not a healthy lifestyle,
That's just a screenshot of the Marine Corps. Like that's what you do. But, and also what's funny about that too, is like, I think that's funny. Like people look to somebody and be like, oh, this is what he does. I can just do what he does and I'll achieve the same, results. Right. But genetics has a say too. You know what I mean? Like what he's doing might not work for you. It might make your situation worse. So
absolutely.
But yeah, that's just interesting. And I think that's cool. I pictured you to be this guy like that. That's just like, making his own meals in the barracks and like meal prepping in the barracks. But
yeah, has the George Foreman all set up.
Yeah, we had one, man. We had the little skillet, the electric skillet in there doing it up, but which you weren't supposed. Well, like you weren't supposed to have those for whatever. I mean, I'm sure fire.
Yeah, there's probably some fire risk or whatever, but I mean, you got to make life livable.
Yeah, right,
for sure.
I used to survive off of the. They used to put up MRE boxes in the lounges, especially for hurricanes, and I used to steal those, and that's what I used
just have extra MREs.
Well, I couldn't always. We couldn't. There, you know how they promised us 3 meals a day. We would never get to the chow hall, and going to the chow hall, if you're not like first there, you're getting like all the crap that's on the side because dudes don't know how to like scoop their salad, and it's just garbage food.
For sure.
So I was surviving off of MREs, dude, like 24/7.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish one of the things I try to do is I wish I had more information out, and it's on my list to get that information out, is to give people that live in the barracks kind of like a play-by-play of kind of what to keep on hand, like non-perishable foods and perishable foods and ways you can prep, like even within the barracks regulations, so that they have more options when you can't go to the chow hall. Because that was a big deal with us too, especially at breakfast time, because like PT would often go so long that it was just like too late to grab chow.
Roach coach.
Oh man, California burrito. Woo.
So kind of getting into your business, Grunt Grub, if you want to get into that, I think it, it's kind of funny how I started following you. So we have a mutual friend, that we've never met each other, but we know this guy, Clint. And
he's awesome.
Clint, he always cooks, like he's a great cook, and he's always posting like these great shots of like whatever he's doing, all kind of different like meals and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I've talked to him a lot about that, but I don't know if he shared something that you posted, but then I started following you. I'm like, what is this guy doing? And then I'm like, damn, you're like making amazing looking meals too. And not only that, like you share info on your page about like, and I think that's so important because social media and whatever, like you can find a ton of things that tell you what not to do, like avoid sugar, like excess sugar. But it's like, what's my option? What's the alternative?
Mhm.
If I'm eating Pop Tarts or toaster strudel for breakfast, like what should I do instead? Not just don't tell me don't do that. Then I'm
Right.
thinking like, okay, well, I need guidance here. And you do that. Like you said, I think a couple days ago or something, you were like, you posted like several reels about like, you know, it was like meal prep kind of stuff, and just like information on what you need if you're going to be like the planning phases, and if you're going to be exerting energy throughout the day, like here's stuff you can have with you so you're not making poor choices. And
Yeah.
so yeah, if you want to just get into that, or what like made you start that, or how that idea that came along,
For sure. So the name, I was actually on a super long run one day and the name just came to me. So like the first thing I did when I came home was like I Googled it, went on Instagram. I was like, is this handle taken? Because I like that. And the whole idea was, you know, whether it's people in the military or in the tactical community, like law enforcement, firefighters, like any of that, or just men in general. Cause like to me, being a grunt doesn't just need to be 0311. Like, my buddy works natural gas and like he's out in the pouring rain, the freezing cold, digging holes, like making sure that that neighborhood has fucking gas. So when they heat their house, they're warm or they can cook on a stove. And like to me, that's a grunt too. So the whole concept of Grunt Grub is just to work with men and men that know what it's like to just get dirty and work super hard, because that's the demographic that I care most about, because that's who I am as a person. And I feel like, growing up, like especially with my father, there's this mentality like gotta eat red meat, like don't eat that many vegetables. Vegetables are gay. And it's like, man, like, there's so much ego involved in your diet sometimes, because you want to be a man, or like you can just like help yourself. Like, I don't need that help. Like, I'll figure it out. And like, that's all fine and good. But I mean, working in the hospital has really shown me the end result of that. I get a lot of vets, and this is changing now, I think, with our generation, but I get a lot of these vets that are like, let's say from 50s to 80s. And a lot of them, if their wife passed away or they're single or they got divorced, they do not know how to cook for themselves at
Yeah.
all. They live on takeout, they live on fast food, they don't take the initiative to learn. And it's super sad. So my whole deal is I want to help men like that, the grunts of the world, first understand the basics of nutrition, because with that as a foundation, it'll help you make the better choices down the road. I firmly believe that you could learn something 100 times, but if you don't know why that is, like if you just follow a rule and you remember the rule, but you don't know why the rule exists, it'll be easy to forget. But if you have the basic information that goes into building that rule, you'll be able to go out in any circumstance, any situation, and then apply that basic knowledge and make the right decision. So like my whole approach is education first, implementation second. And I actually use a ton of the shit I learned in the Marine Corps, right, to kind of guide how I teach, right? Like that post you're referring to is my meal prepping one. And it's almost like an OSMIAC, like orientate yourself, like get a grasp on the situation. And if you can apply those simple acronyms to like your nutrition on a day to day, it's super helpful, because a lot of people don't plan ahead, especially traveling, right? People are like, man, I'm really good when I'm at home. Like if I have a normal regimented schedule Monday through Sunday, I'm good.
Right.
But then I got a business trip or I got a family trip and it's like, oh, and then everything falls apart. It's like, you can pack snacks for the airport. You can learn ways to, address your situation when you're there. Like, are you staying with family? Can they pick up some food for you? Is there a grocery store near where they live? Are you staying in a hotel? Did they have a continental breakfast? Did they have a refrigerator in the room? Did they have a microwave in the room? This is all super easy information to find out. One phone call, maybe even a quick online search. And then you can start having a plan like, okay, I got a mini fridge. There's a grocery store walking distance or a C store. Like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to get to just some basics, some nuts and seeds, just some helpful options so that I can supplement. Even if I have to eat out a couple times, like I'll have a base of healthy food.
Dude, yeah,
But
it's just so
Outstanding. Yeah.
I feel like it's so important. And I have some friends that are like are medical doctors, right? And like when they were going through their schooling and everything, it just shocks me how little topic is touched on, especially as a care provider. It's
For
like,
sure.
when you show up at your doctor, like your regular family practice or whatever, like the first question, if you feel bad, the first question that they should ask you is, what are you eating? How are you sleeping? Like, what's your
Yeah.
stress levels like? Like those
Are you
are,
exercising?
yeah, right, exactly. Like the critical ones. And I don't, and I'm not saying, I'm not trying to blanket like doctors are bad, they don't care about your overall
Right.
health, but like, why isn't this, it's something that should be focused on more, in my opinion. um
I agree
but
100%. I think the healthcare system in the United States, it's really outstanding if you have like an urgent emergency issue. You rupture your spleen, you're in a motor vehicle accident, right? You have a massive hemorrhage, right? Like you need open heart surgery. We got you covered. But it's these little lingering long-term health problems like diabetes, right? Autoimmune diseases that we just don't have a good grasp on because we don't do a good job preventing, and our healthcare is really geared towards fixing urgent problems. So when it comes to like the little stuff, it's like, well, you could try this medication, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
the first advice isn't to go see a dietitian, talk to a physical therapist, right? Like get yourself involved in some exercise.
yeah, no, for sure. And that's just like back in '09 when we were in Afghanistan, like we were in a situation where we ate MREs and UGREs the whole deployment. Unless you're lucky enough to score a goat or some chickens like from the locals. Seriously.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just remember like reading the ingredients on this stuff, and I'm like, this is like, I don't know how we're out here grinding and like fueling our bodies with this, but it like ties back to what you said, how resilient the human body is. And like,
Yeah,
it can just take whatever you throw at it. Doesn't mean it's great for you in the long run, but like you can turn that into fuel and go, fight wars if you need to
for
for,
sure.
for 6-7 months at a time, like just running off of this stuff. And it's like, man, you know, I think part of that, especially for actual grunts, not just like grunts of the world, like you're saying, hardworking, driven individuals, but like actual grunts living that way. When you get out, it kind of puts it's not good, because you're like, oh, I can just, we can just eat whatever. And I also,
Mm-hmm.
but then do that for the next 10-20 years, you're going to start having issues from those poor
Absolutely.
habits. So,
Absolutely. Actually, just a quick note on the MRE thing. So for a long time, I was like, oh, MREs are trash. They're not built right. But there's a dietitian who's a PhD, Nick Behringer. He actually runs the dietetic program down at Baylor, and he has a podcast called Fuel the Fight, and it's all nutrition information. And he had one of the lead food scientists on his podcast that helps develop the MREs, and
right.
she broke it down like nutrient by nutrient and what's in their head as they build them out. Completely changed my perspective on MREs. And
Really?
it's a big reason as to why you could go an entire deployment, like you said, on them, right? Because there are some questionable ingredients, and you're like, there's no way that's healthy. But in the situation that you're in, high sodium, even like high fat content, like your body is just burning it,
Yeah,
and you need
right.
it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you look at the dudes from like World War II, and granted, they're naturally a little bit more slender than we are, but like, man, you look at them after the island campaign, and they are just like skeletons, right? Living on
Yeah.
the sea rations. I mean, so we got it pretty made when it comes nutritionally, and every year they're trying to get them better and better and better, and there's a lot more emphasis going in. And I think the military is finally waking up to the idea that nutrition is important, because even now in like the baseline infantry line units, they're getting dietitians assigned to them, which is
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we found that out about it was like a year or so ago. We had a
Oh,
reunion type
Spalding.
thing, and in Spalding we had, one of our guys, he's involved in all this stuff. How they have who is it, like physical therapists attached to units
Yeah.
and things like that
Mm-hmm.
now to work guys out if they're having ailments, which is amazing. That's
How
just,
sweet
Yeah.
would that have been? You know what I
yeah,
Yeah.
mean?
Actual pack teams. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
But
No
it's
more
great.
take a Tylenol and change your socks and drink
Right.
water, right? Like that was it forever.
But it's
Yeah.
great. But it's great they're doing that, and that's, and like you say, that's like life information. It's so interesting, people's like concept of what the military is like, but it's like the amount of information that you get if you like pay attention after you get out, like you are set up. to be a leader, if that's what you want to do, because you just have, I don't know, like that's just what I felt like, even though we didn't get a ton of that. It was just kind of, we were on the grind more or less, but it's like, man, like if you look back and you think about the stuff you learned, it's like, it's
It's
just
all
beautiful.
foundational. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful life
Without a
advice that,
doubt.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like the infantry does the best job of that. I feel like people like have this misrepresentation of, well, when I get out, like, what can I do? I'm good at shooting a rifle or this and that, but it's like you're looking at it the wrong way. Even if you weren't in a leadership billet, team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant, whatever, even if you were just a guy, through osmosis of being part of that system, you have the skills necessary to be an effective leader. I mean, the Marine Corps does the best job in the world of that, in my opinion. And I think that is a huge reason I was successful in school, and I'm successful now just in my career, because I feel like I've got the skills to adapt, overcome, right? Like all those acronyms and sayings that you're just like, oh yeah, BAMSIS, oh SMEAC, yada, yada, yada. Like, man, if you think about it, you're like, okay, how can I apply this to just like an everyday life situation? It's super applicable.
Yeah.
I always I was like in the same boat. Like when I got out of the Marine Corps, I thought I was gonna do like border patrol or go into the army and do something, but my body just broke on me. And eventually I realized that I didn't have to go to college. I didn't know anything about anything at that point. I just knew that I was really good at using my body in operations and I could fight. And so I went into, college, and I struggled a lot, similar aspects. I was doing things, I almost ended up killing people as a result of not having anybody or any guidance. And I went from nursing, I took biology 201, and I was like, no way, I can't do this. Then I transitioned to psychology, and then eventually I found my niche in philosophy and religion. And there's not much that you can do with philosophy and religion outside of like lawyers and maybe some type of like logician type like roles, like I don't know, like analytics or something like that.
Sure.
So then I went into back into operations. But one of the things that I found was I quickly realized that throughout all of this like struggle, it's pretty much a sustained operation, and sustained operations coming out of like the stability village operations template. One of the things that's sailing out of that whole thing is that it's more psychologically grueling, and it's psychologically grueling because it's over a long period of time where there's all these variables. You're not seeing much progress because you have all these like human dynamics taking place,
Sure.
and it's not constant action like like what we're told or what we're used to, especially coming from the infantry side of things. But I realized that quickly, if you are able to acquire some skill sets where you're, those bouts where you're like questioning yourself, or you're at the point where you're just going to give up, something ends up coming through and you end up finding your niche as a result of that. And it took me several years to figure that out, but eventually I just realized that that's probably my greatest foundation, is that everything's a sustained operation. If you can, implement some like wellness skills in between those bouts where your like stress hormones are like raging through because you don't know what's going to happen next, or you have a level of uncertainty, then you're going to be all right. And I'm still kind of transitioning, just not in the sense where I don't know what I want to do. I know what I want to do. It's just a matter of like I have kids now, so I got to take that into consideration, risk,
Right.
monies, all that stuff. So
I mean, honestly, I'm with you. Like I'm happy with where I'm at, but like it took me a long time. I mean, I'm 32 now, so it took me all the way up to this point to kind of feel somewhat settled. But I'm not even still 100% settled. I feel like I could live 10 different lives and do 10 different things, right? Like I could see myself still
yeah,
in the military. I could see myself as law enforcement. I could see myself as a firefighter. Like there's all these things I want to do or could do. And I think guys like us are just that way. I mean, anybody that joins the Marine Corps infantry has an adventurous spirit. And like, it's really hard to find something that you're like, oh yeah, like I'll just do this, I guess, for the next 30 years and call it good. Like your brain's always moving and you're like, what else could I do? What could I do different? So I totally feel you on that. And I think that's good advice to give somebody coming out of the military is like, don't feel like you need to figure it out immediately. Like it takes time. Like you can bounce from job to job. Like you could, you know, get a degree in something and do something completely different. And that's okay. You know, like you'll eventually settle into your role. I think as long as most people coming out of the Marine Corps are, for the most part, hardworking individuals, right? They have it in them to be successful in whatever they do. And as long as you just keep doing that, it'll all work out eventually. It might take some time, but that's okay. Like it'll always work out, you know? And I think that's what causes a lot of people stresses. They're like, oh, they look on social media. They're like, oh, I'm not at this level. Or like they compare themselves to like a buddy that wasn't in the Marine Corps. And they're like, shit, this guy's got like a fucking $1 million house and he's got this high paying job, yada, yada, yada. It's like, you know, everyone's fucking on their own journey, climbing their own mountain. And somebody's mountain's going to look a lot different than your mountain. They're going to be at a different stage than you are. And that's totally okay. I think just being comfortable in your skin and being comfortable with what you're doing and just being confident in your abilities to be successful in whatever you do, that's what's important. And that's huge in nutrition too. And that's where a lot of people, they're so blinded by what's going on in other people's lives that it distracts them and takes away from their own journey and where they're at. And, you know, and they're like, oh, I'm going to try this because it's working for that person. And they're like, oh, that doesn't work. I'm going to try this, you know? But like we talked about before, like every human's so individualized, you know, like you gotta create something that works for you when it comes to diet and nutrition, you know, like you have to take in your cultural preferences, what foods you actually like, right? What foods are in your area that you can even obtain. Like there's so much that goes into it. That's why I don't write diet plans for anybody, because nobody is going to be able to follow a rigid diet plan longer than a couple months before they just need a new diet plan because they're either sick of it or it's not working, you know?
Yeah.
Variability. Yeah.
You hit a lot of, you made a lot of good points in that last couple minutes. And I mean, there's just, I think uplifting each other and like, you know, letting something with, you know, my mom, for example, we have a family business. I work with my mom every day and she's constantly on and off with like her diet and exercising and stuff like that. And I never like, I share some things with her from time to time, but it's like, what I tell her is I'm like, she'll start something new or she'll fall off and I'm like, just keep trying. Just keep trying. Like that is the best thing that you could say to somebody that's struggling with, you know, trying to reach their end goal and they don't know which path to take. It's like, just keep going, just keep trying, you know, and just motivating her that way. And it, like, she does great. She'll, you know, ebbs and flows like everything, but it's like the main point is that you're not losing sight of where you want to be.
100%.
And you'll get there eventually. But I think there's some things too with like people that struggle with physical ailments, like physical injuries or daily like physical pain, you know, mental issues, depression, anxiety, all these kind of things like compound, letting you crawl out of that hole you can get yourself in, right? So like,
for sure,
if you don't mind, you know, maybe some things to avoid. Okay, let's take an individual at baseline, right? They don't exercise very much. You know, they're dealing with anxiety, depression, sitting at home a lot. You know, they might work a job, but they come home and they just kind of veg out afterwards because they're exhausted from the day. Their energy levels aren't high. What would you, you know, if you don't mind, you know, kind of giving a little bit of advice if somebody's listening and they feel like they're kind of in a position like that? Because I know once you start fueling yourself properly and getting better sleep, then you might, you know, have the energy to start doing some light exercise or get, you know, just the small steps to get to the bigger ones.
For sure. So just a quick point on that, just so I don't forget to mention it, you know, we touched on it earlier, but you don't really realize how good you can feel if you've never felt that good, because you don't know what you don't know. It's only when you feel that good that you realize for so long you've been feeling not good. Because if you get into this, if you're at a baseline that's not good, that's just your normal, you know, aches and pains, you know, like irregular bowel movements, like all of these things. That's just like what you think's normal. But when everything comes into alignment, exercise is on point, diet's on point, sleep's on point, hydration's on point, and you're at this level, you're like, oh my God, like I never not want to feel this good again, right? Like I always want to feel as good as I feel right now. Yeah. But you got to get to that point first. So how do we get to that point then? So a couple things. One thing I do with a lot of my clients, and I didn't come up with this, I got this from somewhere, is, you know, we start with finding a purpose. And I think where I attribute it to is I read this book called Sapiens a while back, and it's all about like the history of mankind, but really it kind of it points out that we all think we have this design purpose. Now, whether you're religious or not religious, right? You're like, I have a purpose in life, and I don't disagree with that. But I think the way humans evolved is our initial purpose was just to make sure that we were fed and that we were safe and we had shelter, right? Like, so every day was survival. Like, I got to find food. I got to make sure my house is strong, and I got to make sure my family's safe. And like, that was a day-to-day struggle. But in modern society, we don't need to do that for the most part. Now, I'm not taking away from people that are dealing with like food insecurity, because that's still a real issue. But I feel like most people, you got plenty of food in your fridge, right? You got a roof over your head, or you got a place you can stay. And for the most part, we're safe, right? Like, so all that is now taking off the playing field. So it's like, it's no wonder so many people feel lost, like they don't have a purpose, right? If that is our inherent purpose. So I tell people, you got to pick a purpose. You got to pick something that you're passionate about and make it your purpose, make it your mission. Okay. So once we have that, we then go to an exercise I call the 5 whys. Excuse me. And this is the one I did not come up with. I got it from somewhere else. But essentially, you've got this purpose, and then you ask yourself a series of questions, all why. Okay, why do I want to achieve that? So let's say it's, I want to look sexy for summer. Okay, all right. Why do you want to look sexy for summer? Well, because I'm single and I want to, like, have some girls around me, right? I want to maybe date, maybe want to find my wife, whatever it may be. That's 2 whys. Okay, but why do you feel so, like, why do you feel like you need a person in your life, right? And you keep going down until you hit 5 whys, until you get to that root cause. So now you've got a purpose picked out for yourself and a root cause as to why that's a good one. And having those 2 things is super important, because that's what you need to focus on when times get rough or you're feeling lazy, is you're like, nope, going to stay on track. Now, going back to what you were just talking about with your mom, because that's another really important piece of the puzzle, is consistency is everything. And a really good way to visualize it is like plots on a graph, right? It's going to be a scatter plot of like good progress stays up high and bad progress stays down low. But if the majority of them are increasing high, right, and you drew a line through all of them, right, like a least squares regression line to get an average slope, you want that slope to be pointing up, right? That should be the goal, because the mission, like Jose was just talking about, is long term, right? The end date is your date of death, right? And if we can make that, let's say in our 80s, 90s, even 100, man, that's a long time, okay? But I think humans are so motivated by short-term goals, right? 30-day this, 1 year this. So it's really hard to be like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to do this forever. And that's why it's super crucial to find things that work for you, because if you're like, all right, like 75 hard, all right, you got to work out twice a day, drink a gallon of water. But in our heads, we already know at the end of 75 days, it's over.
Right.
And that's why so many diets don't work out. I mean, statistically speaking, it's like over 95% of people that lose weight on a diet gain it all back, if not more. And that's because, as soon as the diet ends and they didn't learn anything, they just simply restricted themselves. Well, they're just going to go back to their old ways, of course. I mean, that's common sense. The fact that so many people don't realize that, but I have sympathy for all these people that go through that, because, their heart's in the right place. They want to get healthy. They want to be in shape. But everything out there is so misleading, and it's so tragic, because so many of these companies are doing things that they have to. I cannot believe that they don't think that the information they're spreading is not positive. It's not healthy, right? It's all about, who's going to buy my magazine? Who's going to buy my products? Who's going to buy my program, right? And that's where it's like the money issue is such a big thing, and especially here in America, right? I mean, we're a capitalist society, and that's just the way it goes. So I really try to reach people and kind of help them sift through all of that so they can feel confident in what they're doing. Because, like I said, going back to it, the end game, the mission end date is the date you die. So this is like you're in it for the long run. So how can we develop habits, tendencies that are going to get us on that graph again to have a linear slope that's in the positive, if that makes sense?
It does. This is I'm going to keep this short. this is one of the mechanisms that I'm looking at. I call it bioencryption. And bioencryption is just kind of like this multi-tiered process where we look at everything that's viable for human optimization so that when adversarial impacts like cyber attacks that shut down a pipeline, or your data is leaked and you get your data stolen and your money's taken out of your account, or you have predispositions that are genetic or environmental, all those things have a human body impact. And if we don't have the proper mechanisms in place, whether that's our individual wellness skills or our community resources, or even just the state and national resources, then all this trajectory towards like some goodness is just sideswiped completely. And how do you do that, especially in a time where geopolitical tensions are at an all-time high? You know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
and it's a hard thing to do because we don't know. Oh my goodness! Like just thinking about like the gas prices that was it just not too long ago.
Yeah.
I was at a point where it was like $5 a gallon, and I have to drive just about almost an hour a day to get to my site where I work. And I told myself, like, man, if this goes like to $7 a gallon, I'm not going to be able to do this. It's not going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, because it cancels itself out, right? Like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
spending so much money on fuel to make a certain wage that it just doesn't make sense logically anymore.
no. And so, yeah, so like that was an actual factor. But at the same time, too, I wasn't really worried about, well, if I can't go to work, that's fine too. I'm going to be able to survive because
Right.
we're well off more than most folks. But I can't imagine like people who are making ends meet paycheck to paycheck. So it's just, yeah, I don't know how, I mean, there is a way, and like you said, through public education and education in general, it's just how are these larger forces impacting us, and what can we do at the individual level in order to either one have some type of immunity toward or stay toward that path. And food is a really big one. I know that personally, whenever I'm out of whack, out of line, like I'm eating like garbage, um, then my thinking process, my ability to remain consistent, discipline, it goes out the window. And
For sure.
it actually, my body responds. It's weird. I developed a weird adverse like effects as a result of that. Like for example, when I first started trying to lose weight, because I let myself go. I got married, and then I started writing, and I got comfortable to drinking whiskey and getting in that thought process. And I was doing nothing but like powerlifting, and so I got big, but it wasn't a good big. It was an unhealthy big. It was like
Sure.
it just wasn't good. Um, but I tried to get back on a diet, and I started. Well, I'll just do what I did in the Marine Corps, which was tuna packets and trail mix. But I quickly found out that I developed like this like adverse like taste to tuna packets now, and chicken packets and can't, like, you know what I'm saying, like stuff that I used to think is going to lean me out, and I
Sure.
just couldn't do it anymore. And I couldn't run the long distances like I used to. And I was like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And and man,
You
it
know,
was. Go ahead.
that brings up a really good point. And we touched on this earlier, and I wanted to mention this, but I forgot it. So, I use this saying a lot. So I just went through, I don't know if you follow my Instagram at all, but I just had rhabdo, which was like a
Oh,
huge setback for my training. Yeah, I did
Damn, dude.
yeah.
I was training for a 50K in Wyoming, which my buddy just crushed, placed 16th. I was
Wait,
supposed to
hang on.
run.
Isn't that like potentially fatal if you get it bad enough?
Yeah, because what happens is rhabdo essentially is you break your muscles down so much that myoglobin from your muscle cells leaks into your bloodstream. And if you don't stay hydrated enough and your blood becomes concentrated and that myoglobin concentrates as it goes through your kidneys, it can block a tubule and lead to renal failure. So that's
Oh,
why it's like,
Is that what happens when people get electrocuted bad? Like,
it could. I mean, any time a muscle is damaged to that point, it could be a
right.
crushing injury. It could be from exercising too hard. I mean, I don't know about electrocution, so I don't want to say yes or no,
Okay.
and then somebody be like, "No, man, that's not possible."
Right.
only one way to
But
find out.
yeah, but it was a major setback to me. I mean, I could talk about this for a whole podcast, but I'll keep it short. It was a huge learning lesson for me. But I was in a situation that I was not used to. Exercise to me is one of the things that gives me purpose and makes me feel really good. And normally when I have an injury, like let's say I injure my shoulder, I'll run more because my lower body's unaffected. Or maybe I hurt my knee, I'll work upper body. I'll do something that I can still exercise, but avoid, furthering that injury. But with rhabdo, I needed to stay basically light duty, my whole body, no exercise for today I went on my first distance run again since the rhabdo case.
Wow.
And, one thing, the first couple of days were really rough mentally for me, right? Depression, I didn't know what I'm doing. I can't exercise. But I always think back to that general that was in the Korean War, that when he was asked if the Marines were retreating, he goes, "We're not retreating. We're just fighting in a different direction." And I apply that to so many things in life. Instead of me not being able to exercise, I just needed to fight in a different direction because I could no longer exercise. That fight wasn't happening. So what I did is I was like, all right, how can I make this downtime productive? And I went out and I freaking bought 5 books on training, right? Because I was like, you know what? I got into this mess because I wasn't training smart. I overdid it. Well, I'm going to come back and make sure I don't do that again. So I bought 5 books, and instead of exercising for 2 hours a day, I read those books for 2 hours a day, and I made knowledge gains instead of strength and endurance gains. And it was super helpful to me. You know what I mean? And I think if people can apply that approach to life, because that's what life is. It's a series of getting knocked down and picking yourself back up again. It happens to everybody in capacities large and small. So how can you just, take a blow and get yourself back up, right? What are you going to do? Something, some obstacle came in. What are you going to do about it, right? Because by making no decision, you're still making a decision to do nothing.
Yeah.
So you got to do something positive. You got to be productive with your time. You got to, just make it worth your while. And I don't try to be one of those guys like Goggins or Jocko. They have their place in the world, and I love those guys for what they do. But that mindset is what got me in the rhabdo case in the first place. Is just go, 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 too hard. Fuck that. Keep pushing, right? Don't quit. At a certain point, we all have our limits. We have our limits mentally. We have our limits physically. And it's good to find those limits as long as they don't put you in the hospital like it did to me.
Yeah.
So, I'm taking this new approach to just, doing what's necessary, but it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to take a rest day. It's okay to, oh man, see, I have a hard time even saying the fucking word. It's okay to quit. If your body's telling you that it's too much, it's okay. You can say no. And I think this is where the Marine Corps ruined me in the head, is quit is just not an option. I'll have to be dead before I quit. Well, I just about did die, almost, right? Not really. Everything was cool, hydrated, went to a hospital, I was cool. But I worked out to the point of it was a life-threatening condition.
Yeah.
And that was a wake-up call to me. It's damn, okay, you can push your body to a point that's too much. And I think in today's society, we're just in this rush, and it's just go, 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 and it's be better than the next guy, especially military dudes. And I think it can be depressing if you can't keep that tempo up.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you, it's okay to take a step back, to eat some pizza, to have a burger once in a while, right? To chill and take a rest day. Again, long-term goals, right? The more days that are in the positive, your slope's going to be positive. That's good. You can have you don't have to be perfect. Consistency is way more important than perfection. That's where a lot of people, they're like, oh man, I can still have a couple beers or eat some pizza. Yeah, man, it's not going to kill you. And I teach people how to moderate that, right? How to plan appropriately for meals or going out with the boys drinking. There's workarounds. You don't have to completely eliminate it if that's something that brings you, joy, right? If that's something that's important to your culture. I don't want you to cut that out.
Yeah. I have I don't know, I don't know, it's probably the entire infantry or the entire Marine Corps, but degenerative disc disease. When I got out, man, I was doing crazy workouts. I was running 20 miles for warm up, and then doing 3 weightlifting
Jose
sessions
Goggins,
a day.
man, I knew it.
Yeah, dude,
I knew it.
It was nasty. It was not good for my body. But then one day I went to pick up a sock, and dude, my first herniated disc, my back blew out, and I've never felt pain like that.
Jeez.
And I just remember this, my life is over. I can't do anything now. I can't literally do. And then it was a surgery shortly thereafter that put me out for almost 3 months, and I just lost everything. I literally had to relearn how to do a push-up. And that was like my goal, was to learn how to like do the basic stuff. Um, but what, damn, vet brain dude just hit me. I had a point that I was gonna make.
It's all right. It's all right.
But no. Well, here, I think here's the point that I was trying to make is like, even in my injuries, I always do something. Like the you do more injury by not doing anything, and I think that's where a lot of folks like, oh my god, I'm injured, I got to stop completely. Like, no, you don't. You can do something else entirely.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so yeah, dude, that's kind of been like one of the saving graces that I've had, because my body has just not responded well. I don't, I listen like to Rogan a lot. It's like he's got a lot of good points, about consistency and discipline. And you know, even if like you're injured completely, or I've literally been like doing the most minimal thing, like small victories. That's like been like the key indicator that has gotten me through a lot of those like rough years. And
100%.
MCDP1, man, war fighting. Marines exist, or the reason we exist is to fight. It's just, again, you got to put in the direction that you want to go, and then
Yep.
work it.
Refocus the energy. And I think the takeaway message on your situation is you didn't give up.
No,
Like, you kept pushing. And even if you had to start with a single push-up again, you did, you know? So just for me to go back super quick, because I don't want people to get the wrong message. When I say it's okay to quit, I literally mean in certain circumstances where your body's about to give out on you. I don't mean like, like just give up on your mission or quit, like on all that in general. I just mean there are specific situations, very specific. It's okay to quit. But like you just said, Jose, going back at it, not being at the level you once were, that can be a huge,
oh,
huge
yeah,
mental, hurdle. But you're like, nah, like if I have to start with one push-up, I'll start with one push-up. And it's almost kind of fun in that way, is that you're going to regrow. Like I went on my first training run today and I'm like back at square one, 3 weeks off. I'm nowhere near where I was endurance wise. And I'm like, hey, sweet, I get to get back there. It's like, and then I'll have more small victories opposed to being at that higher level where it's like you're just staying consistent most days. Now it's like I'll see some improvements, which is kind of fun. So that's just the way life is, right? It's just how we deal with that.
that's right. I do got a question with your rhabdo. What is the process to returning to kind of like a normal state of
Yeah,
regulation
that's
with
a
that?
great question. And if any of your listeners have it in the future or have had it, my doctors didn't really know what to tell me because they don't deal with athletes getting it in most cases, right?
Oh
It's
wow.
mostly elderly people or crushing injuries.
Mm.
But when I told them I had like a 50K coming up and I want to race it, they couldn't give me, they're like, I feel like I should say no, but I don't actually know. So there's a couple factors that go into it. And I actually had to reach out to a couple people in my inner circle on Instagram. Like I reached out to a couple physical therapists. So if they're listening for any reason, appreciate your advice. Reached out to Nick Behringer, that PhD I told you about, who works closely with a doctor. And essentially, if you don't have the luxury of getting your blood work taken immediately following exercise, the safe protocol is 4 weeks of like no exercise, right? So I'm convinced that the rhabdo was in my upper body is what did it to me, because I've been training lower body so frequently on my endurance runs. I don't think that was an issue. But even as such, rhabdo in itself is such a shock to your system, and your body goes through this immense shock. Your immune system's weaker, right? You have all these things going on. So for somebody that needs to return to training, like it's their job, whether you're an NFL football player or a Navy SEAL, right? And like people are counting on you to be at your best. Well, they've got the luxury of returning to training possibly a little sooner and then immediately following exercise getting lab work drawn to make sure that their that protein in their blood isn't elevated again. So they
Yeah.
can do possibly even 2 weeks out. I've seen as early as 2 weeks. But the safe protocol is 4 weeks of very little activity, massive hydration to make sure that everything's filtering through your kidneys and your blood's not concentrating and getting too thick isn't the right word, but it's a better visual to think of your blood getting thick if you're dehydrated. It helps from nutrients concentrating and then your kidneys working extra hard to filter those out. So massive hydration and rest for 4 weeks, and then a slow, basically at your own pace, slow reintroduction to training. Like I think the easiest way to think about it's like go 25% of what your baseline was, and then take several weeks to get back up to 100%, and listen to your body. If you become extremely sore during or following exercise, you got to pull the reins back a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a lot of learning for me because I had never known any of that.
Well, can you explain, like, when did you know something was wrong with your body?
Yeah,
That seems like so extreme.
The level of soreness I was experiencing the day following the workout that I think caused the rhabdo was like nothing I've ever experienced. Like I've been very sore after exercise all the time. It's fairly normal, you know. Well, I guess not. That makes it sound bad. I'm not like constantly sore, but I've had so many experiences in my life after a hard workout where I've been sore. But this level of sore was like, I mean, I couldn't straighten my arms past like a 90-degree bend, you know, like going like this was like 10 out of 10 pain.
Wow.
And it was my whole upper body, forearms, back. I mean, it was kept me up at night. I couldn't sleep because I was so sore if I roll over. So that was indication number one. And that's when rhabdo started being on the radar. Like, okay, like I've never been this sore before, and I'm a pretty tough dude. So that sounded cocky. But you know what I mean? Like I can deal with pain. I can deal with pain like to a good amount. So I was like, for me to be in this much pain, where like I want to take Advil or something, like it's got to be pretty bad. The last time I did that, I needed a root canal because my mouth hurts so bad. So I was like, okay, that's serious. But then I started pissing blood like 2 days later.
Oh no.
And that's the telltale sign. If your urine changes, it's game over. You got it. You got to go to the hospital and get it checked out.
Damn.
Yeah.
I haven't had piss in my blood, but I've had shit or blood in my shit.
Yes. You got to get that checked out too. I mean, there's some like, you know, benign causes to that, right? Like after a serious MRE shit after the field, that, you know, that can happen. But yeah, man, you want to get, anytime you're, you know, shitting or pissing blood, you probably want a doctor to just give you the okay.
No, yeah, totally. I got a colonoscopy. Again, it was so much crap from too many deployments. That's what it was.
Yeah, probably just lingering in your GI tract.
Yeah,
Can
man.
so this is a segue for me to kind of, you know, I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to a vet buddy, this was a while ago, but I forget what we were talking about, but he's just like, man, I haven't shit solid since I got out. And this is like years after, right? This was like, you know, 2015 or something. And I'm like, dude, that's not like, so I want to ask, like in your education, did they go into like gut brain axis or axis?
Yeah, a little bit.
Because I'm just curious, you know, they call a lot of what you can find out there is they call the stomach like the second brain, and how it communicates, especially in like developing children, how it's important to implement like certain foods, different types of foods. So, you know, your biome communicates up top with like how to build you up, right? How to nourish your body. And I've always known, and I think most people know, like if your stool is irregular, like everybody knows what taking a nice dump is like. But like if it's off for a while, there's something wrong with you. There's something going on inside there that's not right. And I'm just curious, like what you learned, or like what you might know about that, and how that's an important.
So I mean, you're exactly right. Anything to do with the microbiome, and this is generalized, okay? But it starts when you're born, okay? So first things first is vaginal birth is going to give you a better microbiome than a C-section. Wow. So sometimes what they do to infants now is they'll actually take like a vaginal swab and swab the infant's mouth after a C-section birth to try to elicit some of that same bacterial colonization, if you will. The next thing is when a child is growing, playing out in the dirt and mud and getting exposed to different bacteria in the ecosystem is also very important into shaping what our microbiome is going to be in. And in today's world, we live in this like germaphobe clean zone, and it's very hard for kids to get exposed to all the stuff that they should be getting exposed to. Now, fast forwarding to being an adult, like what can we do to, you know, shape our microbiome? So we're basically, the microbiome that we have right now as adults is pretty set in stone, right? There's some research that says you can change it, but only really minutely. The bacteria that you have are the bacteria you're going to have. The one, and this is to the best of my understanding, so if I'm wrong, I have no problem with anybody reaching out and correcting me. But to the best of my understanding, the only way that you can make massive changes to a microbiome is what's called a fecal transplant. So they'll take somebody with a very good microbiome and they'll encapsulate some of their fecal matter and literally give that to you. And that will help kind of restructure your own GI tract to have a better, more diverse microbiome. But I feel like a lot of people sell themselves short. And there's a lot of things you can do dietarily to improve your own microbiome. So you have to understand bacteria are living things, and any living thing needs a source of fuel to live. So to oversimplify it, the good bacteria in our guts, okay, they feed typically on more healthful foods, okay? So if we think of those good bacteria as probiotics, okay, they need prebiotics to feed them, okay? So the number one source of prebiotics is fiber, something that almost all Americans do not get enough of.
Metamucil.
And that's my biggest beef with the carnivore diet. And there's all these people saying fiber is not essential. You don't need fiber, this and that. Well, I would point them to volumes of research to the contrary. And if some research comes out in the future that has a strong backing, lots of human clinical trials, I will change my viewpoint. I have no problem doing that. But as it stands today, fiber is the one thing that these bacteria feed on, and humans cannot digest the fiber, right? It's indigestible carbohydrate bulk, essentially, right? That either speeds up or slows down digestion. So one way we deal with constipation or diarrhea is adjust different levels of soluble and insoluble fiber and try different types to see if that helps. That's like one method to approaching that problem. It's kind of trial and error. But just because we cannot digest that fiber does not mean the bacteria in our guts cannot consume and digest that. And what we're learning, because this is a brand new field of study, new research is coming out every single day about this, and it's really cool. And what they're finding is whatever the bacteria poop out, essentially, after they eat that prebiotic, we can absorb what they poop out. So a lot of stuff they poop out is like short chain fatty acids, and we're able to actually absorb that and use that. So they're finding right now, especially in the athletic community, they're finding certain bacterial cultures in people's microbiome, and they're like, oh, wow, top tier athletes have a lot of this bacteria. And the short chain fatty acids those bacteria are pooping out, essentially, can be beneficial to human performance, which is just wild. But yeah, so I mean, for me, to keep things super simple for all the listeners, and typically this is about as far as I go with my clients too, because a lot of it's, new and it's getting into the weeds a little bit, is just make sure you eat enough fiber. Start there. You'd be amazed if you just hit your fiber goal every day, what it can do to change your life in terms of weight loss, in terms of making your bowel movements more regular. Because if we think about it, right, fiber is an indigestible carbohydrate, okay? The only source of fiber is coming from plant foods. So in order to hit your fiber goal, you're going to have to eat a lot of plant food, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, whatever fruits, vegetables, and whole grains you want. There's a ton of variety, right? You can do brown rice. You can do whole grain bread. You can do broccoli. You can do asparagus. You can do cabbage. I mean, you name it. Whatever fits within your preferences, you've got a huge, vast array of things to choose from. So hitting a fiber goal is not a restrictive goal. Going on a keto diet or a carnivore diet where you cannot eat all of this stuff, the list of things you can have is way bigger than the list of things you can have. Those diets never work out, ever. And I will back that point with science if anybody comes at me. Of course, anybody can have the discipline to make that work long term, but those people are far and few between.
But yeah, and another point on that too is like the commodification of health on social media platforms is pretty gnarly, especially people that are on juice. Like it's clear that they're on TRT or trend, and and
not a shock.
Yeah, you just got to be smart about. I thought he was all natural, by the way.
No, you did not.
First off, I wouldn't eat exotic foods like that. But let me stay on topic. I got another question. So I don't like using that damn word. I take like 5 shits a day, maybe 4. Okay. Is that good? Is that healthy? I've heard that it should be after every meal. And I've always fasted. It's been part of my religion. It's kind of funny that, religious practices are now a commodity in the social
Yeah.
media thing, like with intermittent fasting. I'm like, but we used to do that at church.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's a good documentary series called Unwell. Don't get me started with documentaries because they're always one-sided and this and that, but there's a series called Unwell on Netflix, and one of the episodes is specifically dedicated to fasting. And there's a dietitian on there kind of arguing against these like super long, prolonged. I mean, people did like 36-day water fasts, like
Wow.
extreme.
oh no,
Whereas
no,
most of the research that we have on fasting is all from these big religious studies, because those are human studies, right? A lot of the other research for fasting is all still done in mice. And there's some good research coming out of Italy, and that was shown in the documentary, where they are doing planned clinical trials with humans, but like we just don't have a big body of evidence yet. And if we don't have a big body of evidence, it's very risky as a practitioner to give somebody that advice. For religious fasting, fantastic, right? We've got big volumes of evidence to support that. And most religious fasts, it's basically just an intermittent fast where they're
yeah,
just restricting during daylight hours, but they're still able to eat at night.
yeah, yeah.
At most a 24-hour fast.
Yeah, I know. Have you heard about it's somewhere over Europe, or it's like Sweden or the Netherlands or something, where like people go there if they have cancer, and they go to like this clinical like fasting program where it's like 40 days or something.
Yeah, that
And
was
it's
on the show.
oh, it is
Whoa.
on that show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading about that, or I saw it somewhere, and I was like, that's crazy. And they're getting like good results from doing it. Like,
So my advice to anybody that would be in that, right? If you're at a point where you have cancer or this disease, right? I personally would always start with what my doctor says. Okay. I do have faith in the American medical system still. Now, if you're super opposed to that, or you try what they say and it doesn't work, it's your life at the end of the day.
yeah,
Right. And I feel like, and even the place at the show, they did have medical professionals monitoring lab work, monitoring labs. Like that is a controlled environment. It's a lot safer than if you were to try it on your own. You know what I mean?
right.
But as long as people are educated going into it on the risks that they could be taking, at the end of the day, it's their choice. As a practitioner, that's all I ever try to do is just give you the tools and let you make the decision. I'm not here to tell you what to do and what not to do. That's for you to decide. I just want to offer you as many tools as possible for you to make those educated decisions.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I feel like I'm glad we did this, because I mean, we can keep going. We're only like an hour 20 in. If you got anything you want to
Yeah,
hit
Rogan
on.
does 3 hours, man. I'm in it for the
Yeah,
marathon.
however, I know you could probably talk forever on it, but yeah, and I think it's kind of unique too with your like your own thing you're doing with your own business, is that like you're specifically tailoring towards like men, which I know, that in today's world is like, oh, you can't just,
Oh
but
yeah, dude.
when I saw that, I was like, that's awesome, because you're doing what you know and what you feel like you're going to be the best at, in advising people on how to take care of themselves.
Absolutely. And if somebody doesn't fit, if they're not a good fit with me, so like all female clients that come asking for advice, like if they see one of my advertisements out in town and they're like, hey, I'm interested in working with like a nutrition professional, I have other dietitians that are females that I will refer them to. So I'll make
Right.
sure they're in good hands. I just know that that's not, I could absolutely probably figure it out, but I want that person to get the absolute best advice possible. And that's just not my wheelhouse,
Yeah,
especially with female hormones and all this and that. Like there's a lot more going on. And personally, I'm biased in this way, but like a lot of times I take advice better from people that are like me, right? Like if I had a, and this is going to sound bad. I don't even know if I say it, but I'm going to do it anyway. If I had a doctor that was like fat, lazy, and out of shape, I just naturally have less respect for what they have to say. Right.
Yeah,
And it's almost like a political
yeah,
leader. If I see a political leader is like physically weak, I have a harder time following that person.
sure.
It doesn't mean that they always need to be this big, strong macho man, but I want to see that in their daily life they have discipline. And the first thing that I look for is that person, like, do they look like they have discipline? And the first thing is obviously your visual. Do they look like they're in shape?
Right.
If they're in shape, it means they exercise. And just that alone, boom, that means they have some sort of discipline. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
I
that's a tough
I
one.
kind of got to say I'm on your side with that too, because I just, you're not. What are you? You're a car salesman for like health, personal health. You're gonna tell me, like, dude, okay. Anyway,
Yeah. I mean, you can't always base it on looks because everyone has their certain circumstances, like we just talked about, right? Maybe that person was super in shape and then they had a back injury, like Jose mentioned, right? And now they're not able to, but they implement discipline in other ways.
Yeah.
But humans, I feel like it is a necessary survival instinct to have that quick, like, assessment, really quick, like, okay, and trust your gut at first, right? And then obviously you can dive into the weeds. But I feel like men are more receptive to men and women are more receptive to women. And that's the point I was trying to get at. I feel like women work really good with women because I don't have a female body. I don't know what it's like to have a menstrual cycle once a month or to deal with pregnancy or post-pregnancy. Whereas another woman will have that in common. And that's big when you're working with somebody, right? Just like a woman probably doesn't know what a man feels like when he goes through this massive testosterone spike when he's sitting in Southern California traffic and he's banging his steering wheel and you don't know why that is. And you're like, well, because you've never experienced it.
I'm the same way with like behavioral health. I try to limit my case to females. Just one, the environment that we're currently in, it's just not suitable. And there are situations that have taken place where it's just like especially with other men who take advantage of others. That's a really big activation. And it, I leave that one up to other professionals. But also too, it's just I couldn't tell you like with all the biology and again the current environment that we're in. I don't know what that's like, so I can't assist you. Now I can assist you with like certain wellness skills, right? Things that we can do to make your environment less toxic, or for you to go ahead and start the process of healing, whatever that may be. But I always go, work with young men, boys and stuff. But also too, I think uh, a lived experience goes a long way, right? I won't take it. I won't take advice from anyone who is not. I mean, I'll take advice. It's very like, for example, I know a lot of people quote Jordan Peterson. He's got a lot of good stuff. A lot of the, because I have a philosophy and religion background. A lot of the stuff that he talks about, especially like the Jungian type thing. I'm sorry, I'm not going to take advice from you. I know you're a warrior. You're an intellectual warrior. That's great, but you're just not gonna right. Someone like you is gonna get more through me rather than he is, and I don't care if you have a PhD or not. It's just not gonna work out.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%, and I think especially men feel that way more so than women. I feel like women are a little bit more receptive to advice from other people, but men really like that. It's like I feel like it's an evolutionary thing. It has to be. Like it comes down to respect of the individual. Like you look at another man, you're like, am I going to respect you? Yeah. And if I respect you and I know where you've been, I can relate to you. I'll take your advice. I'll heed your advice more so, and maybe use a little less of the grain of salt approach.
Yeah. I have a question for you, with regards to, let's say you're what would you say to guys in their 30s? Like, what's the best way to go about, like, say I had a hiccup, I'm not where I want to be. Maybe my marriage is failing. Maybe I'm failing as an individual. I don't feel where do I start? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So this is probably not a nutrition answer, but one thing that I have found super helpful as I've gotten older. So like the past couple of years have been a whirlwind, just like going through school, getting out of the Marine Corps, like moving back home, being with family, not all of which is a great environment. It's caused a lot of stress in my life, So what I found to be super helpful for me is that I make sure that at least, a couple times a week at a minimum, I really find some solitude, some alone time. And there's a couple books I read, and actually several of them are purely rooted in philosophy. So I'll do a couple verses from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I read one verse out of the Daily Stoic. I read this book called The Way to Love, and it's the last meditations of Anthony de Mello. It was a Jesuit priest, and it's just a whole bunch of compilations basically on happiness and his viewpoint on attachment and happiness. And then a new one I added to the repertoire is Rules of a Knight and it's by Ethan Hawke, and there's this cool background story, but there's like 12 rules. Try to read one of those a day. It's just like rules to live by. But basically, I'll read through that and I'll journal. And sometimes I journal before I read, sometimes I journal after I read. But I basically just try to get all my thoughts out on paper, and I really try to identify what's going on with me. What am I feeling? I try to flesh out my emotions, because forever I didn't do that, right? I would just react. I'd be such a reactive person, whether that was with anger, sadness, love. I was just completely reactionary. But I never, until it built up to a point where I was like, I was just like constantly stressed, not sleeping good. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's causing this. And then I started thinking about it. Like, all right, well, like it was one night over Thanksgiving, and this is a couple of years ago. I literally just sat up at night and I just typed a huge long note on my phone, everything I could think of that was causing me issues. And man, as soon as I finished it, that huge long story, I just fell asleep. I was like, man, it just felt so good to get it off my chest and write it out. Because when I wrote it out, it's like downloaded out of my brain onto a different medium. And then I could attack each problem individually. Like, okay, that's causing me stress. Well, what am I going to do about that? And then, oh, that one is too. What am I going to do about that? And now I just do that more frequently. Instead of having it all build up to this, like pressure cooker situation, I hash it out almost daily. If something's bothering me, I stop immediately. I'm like, whoa, why am I getting upset about this? Like, what's causing this? What's the root cause? And that helps tremendously. And not only helps you with dealing with stuff like that, but it kind of helps you plan for the future. Because now I'm just sitting down journaling. So whatever's on my mind, I'm like, oh, this is a good business idea, or this is what I'm happy about, or this is what I like doing. It's really helped me identify the things in my life that bring me true joy, and the things in my life that cause me stress, right? So one thing I did this year actually is I gave up alcohol, and it started with dry January, and then I just decided I'm just going to cut it out for the whole year and see how I feel. So now we're at June, so like halfway through the year, and man, like it feels great. Like I don't know what I'm going to do come 2024. Like maybe I'll pick it back up. Maybe I'll keep it cut out. But as of right now, I feel amazing. And it hasn't detracted at all from my life. In fact, my life, I would say, is better. My mood's more stable. I feel healthier. It's improved my training. And that's something, like I'm not an advocate for or against alcohol. You know what I mean? I feel like alcohol can have a healthy place in the diet, obviously from a nutritional standpoint, but just for me, it's something that I just wanted to do for me. And it feels great. But I wouldn't have gotten to that point if I didn't start with, kind of unraveling my mind, if you will. And then those philosophy books I read kind of just give me a starting place. If there's a day where I just don't have a lot of initial thought, and I need a spark, those little passages really help get the ball rolling and get my brain thinking. Just a lot of self-reflection. If I have to put it super simply, it's just taking that time to really understand who you are as a person. What are my goals? What are my values? What are my passions? Because once you have a clear grasp of who you are, well, man, then the whole world's your playground, right? And you can really play to your strengths and either work on your weaknesses or avoid the things that cause you all this stress.
Yeah, that's
good. Did that answer your question, Jose? I know that was a super long-winded explanation.
No, that's good. Variability is good. That's what I always say to people is like, well, I've talked with Polly quite a bit about this. I know there's a lot of complexity when it comes to health and wellness. But at the end of the day, what it reverts back to is the individual has a choice, and they can choose to be well or choose not to be well. They can choose to heal or not to heal. What has to happen, though, is there has to be cultivation of the environments that person is living in order for that to actually take place. And it's just hard for some people, right? The answers are within you, right? And sometimes you need a little bit of guidance. But yeah, so variability and then asking that question, whether it's via talking to a general or talking to, a fellow grunt, it's always good to have those, those wide percepts. And I can attest to what you said about the alcohol. I took a 6 month break from drinking anything. And I'm 35 now, so I can feel everything now. What I put in my body, I feel it a lot more than I used to. And it's just so crazy. And I just function a lot better. Not that I ever was a heavy drinker. I was like periods throughout my life, but not as much. But I took 6 months off. I felt great. And even whenever I did pick it up again, it was like very, very small. And I've been doing psychedelic assisted therapy. That's been beneficial.
That is
Microdosing.
awesome.
Yeah, dude. And like the inflammation, my clarity, my vet brain isn't as bad unless I get, no sleep. And one of the things that impacts my relationship, however, is I'm still too regimented, like not institutionalized, but I'm regimented, and it's like, no, like I can't go out.
Yeah. Like you don't do well when you're not on a schedule.
Yeah, dude.
Bro, I totally get that for sure. I'm the same. I'm the same way. And one thing I've been trying to work on in my personal life is I'd get so upset if something made me deviate from my schedule. Like I
Yeah,
literally
yes.
physically feel like upset about it. Like if something just came up, which that's fucking life, right? Like it's gonna happen every week.
That's
I'd
your
be like,
OODA loop.
oh, like I can't train as long as I need to, right? I'm gonna get 30 minutes less of sleep or this or that. And it's like,
Dude, yeah.
man,
I
that's
was
life. Like
that's what I was talking with Polly about this morning. I was like, there's been people at my house for like the past 2 weeks, and I'm like, I have not been able to do a fucking thing besides, train. I just like, oh my God. And that's a hard thing to tackle. And you can't, I can't be treating my family like they're Marines and shit. So that's something I'm working on.
for sure. I mean, that's what life, and that's what diet's the same way. It's just something you're working on. And it's always
Yeah.
going to be something you're working on. You're going to have bad days. It doesn't need to be perfect. Oh,
Yeah,
I love this topic because I think it's so important for especially guys like us to talk about that. I saw this, I think it might have been a MARSOC thing, or maybe they stole it from somewhere else, but it was like operator rules of life. And one of the rules on that list was surround yourself with greatness and have a diverse circle. And I think it's so important to have a diverse circle of people with different backgrounds. And that's what makes the Marine Corps great, is because you're forced to be in a diverse circle.
Yeah.
But keeping that when you get out, and just having different mindsets and having people with different skill sets, and all people that are really trying to work on themselves and being the best version of themselves, because then you can share openly and bounce ideas back and forth. It's really hard to do it by yourself. It's really hard.
Oh yeah. That's why I love podcasting.
There's that quote. There's a quote out there. It's like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future, or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's like basically what you said. But me and Jose, anybody that like listens to this regularly, knows we talk about like leadership traits and principles a lot. And one that we both live by is know yourself and seek self-improvement. And that goes back exactly. I read something a few weeks back, maybe a couple months back, that was like, if you have, I'm not a huge goal setter as far as like 5-year, 10-year, 20-year,
Sure.
like writing them out. I keep them up here, and they do kind of fluctuate sometimes. And sometimes like, you achieve things. I don't want to put something like, when I write something down, that to me is like, it's set in stone. Like 5 years, I'm going to do this. Well, if I achieve that goal, my 5-year goal in 2 years, like I want some fluidity in my goals.
Sure.
But I read that if you write, like people who write down their goals, whether it be short-term, long-term, you're 40% more likely to achieve that goal than if you didn't have any type of system of tracking what you wanted out of your life. And I can understand this, because there are people in my life that are like opposed to that. And I understand how doing that can cause stress for some people, right? Like I'm not achieving it at that pace or at the right, along the timeline that I wanted. Oh, I'm a failure. Oh, what I mean? I can see how there's like bad to that, but I think going back to leadership traits and principles, like if you know what your baseline is, like we talk about that, and when you're deviating one way or the other, like what you need to do to bring yourself back on track. I don't think everyone has that ability. And I think that's why it's important for people and, guys like you that offer a service like this, we all have our own, egos, right? But this is not coming from that. This is, I want to help this community out. You're like me. I know what works for me. If you don't know what works for you, I can maybe help you. And I just think that is awesome. I talk a lot on here about, competition, being in competition with one another. Like, are the people around you, are they in competition with you? Are they on your team? Are they trying to help you and support your goals? And a lot of times there can be snakes in the grass that you don't realize. And it's like, man, it takes time to realize what's actually holding you back and making adjustments off of that. And one thing for me personally is that, I say it to Marine buddies is like, man, the Marine Corps ruined me as far as what my expectations are for my fellow man.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's such a high caliber, in those groups that it's like, when you see, and I know it sounds bad, but it's just like,
Bro, I
man,
get it.
it's like, man, dude, like, got to get it together. We got to get it together out
Like
here.
when I went through squad leader school, when I went through squad leader school and I came back to my unit, I was like disappointed.
Right.
Because like I was used to be, I was in like a super squad of all squad leaders. Like my whole squad was squad leaders. And when I ran a mission, it was like just like picture perfect, right? Like out of a Marine Corps pub execution, like beautiful. And then I come back to my dudes and I'd be like, but then it was like, but this is a reflection of you as their leader.
Yeah.
I was like, if I want them to be a super squad, I must teach them, right?
Dude,
and that came later in my Marine Corps career when I was like a little bit more responsible.
It's funny you say that because I remember being a boot. I remember being a boot and the squad leaders coming back from that, and it was just like haze fest for like the next month, dude. It was like PT in the morning. You're like, what's going on? Like you had some senior team leader running the squad while they were gone, and we're just chilling, still working out and doing this stuff. But then squad leader gets back and it's like, oh damn, dude.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, it happens to every person. That's why I didn't want to go to squad leader school because I was like, it's gonna ruin me. I don't know what they do to you there, but you're going to come back a different person.
Yeah, they turn you into a machine, dude. They turn you into an animal.
Man, for sure.
That's great.
Funny. Fucking laughing, man.
I love that they do that. Like they do that. That's it's by design, right?
For sure. Honestly, like that was a pivotal moment in my Marine Corps career because I wasn't unmotivated, but like I had a lot of terminal lances around me, and that mentality was like it proliferated pretty hard in my unit, especially being on MEUs. So I was kind of like, I wasn't a bad Marine, but I wasn't an exceptional Marine. Like I was a team leader, but like probably not doing as good of a job as I could have been. But squad leader school, like really, and I got a new lieutenant that really helped too. He was a huge inspiration. So like those two things combined really made me like, and then I felt bad. I was like, man, I could have been a better team. Like the whole last year I felt like was a waste where I could have been like a better leader to my dudes,
Right.
And squad leader school ruined me for life, bro. Like that's a big reason of like why I did well in school and like my like current discipline and regimen. It all came from that school. But yeah, man, there's some things I wish I would have done differently in the Marine Corps for sure. And like having done squad leader school later in my career, like I was like, oh, I wish I could have had this knowledge like 2 years ago,
Yeah. And that's something that I talk about now. Like I've talked about this with my dad, like just about exactly what you're saying about how like the skater mentality, just how toxic it is, especially in the Marine Corps, but like it's out in the, the civilian world too. It's like getting out of having to do stuff. And it's like, you know how like, just, I hate saying toxic because that's such like a
buzz term.
Pathogenic. Say pathogenic.
But right. Pathogenic. But it is though. It's like, man, you don't realize the impact that you can have on people by having that mentality and like teach, especially you don't know who looks up to you, right? Like in your daily people you interact with you might be rubbing them, some type of way. And if they see you behaving that way, they're like, oh, I want to emulate this guy, or, I like his, his vibe. So I'm going to do what he does. And if you're this, shitbag skater type of dude, it's like, there's no good coming out of that. Like you're not helping somebody along the way. So
I'm glad you say that because like I struggle with that on social media because like, sometimes when I post like workouts or like long runs or this and that, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to be this dude that's just like constantly posting. Like I never want to feel like I'm like I try, and this is something I've been working on, is just to be humble, right? And like not be any like to not showboat, to not brag, right? So sometimes when I post on social media, I feel like it is that in a way, even though that's not my intention. Like people don't understand my intention when I post because they're just seeing it point blank. But really that's what it is I'm just trying to show you that it's you can be consistent. I'm just trying to serve as an example of what you could be. Anybody can do this, right? Like I'm busy too, like I was going through grad school, working at the hospital, starting a business, being married, remodeling a house. Like I'm busy too. And like everyone's busy in their own different ways, but it's still possible to find time to exercise in whichever capacity your body's physically able to do. And also find time to meal prep and eat healthy. Like it is doable.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Go
ahead,
ahead, Bob. Okay.
No,
No, I was just, uh, I have the same, I have the same, I don't like most of the R&D stuff that I do is in the narrative space, understanding what emotion related information does to psychophysiological architecture and how human weather is swayed, like the operation side of things. And one thing and one of the reasons why like I haven't commodified the O3XX series is the same thing, right? I just don't doing it organically from the heart. I think will get you further than just trying to gain the base. And I think the difference between there is a level of discernment that comes with watching growth. And I think people understand and know authenticity. So like, and I say it all the time with like this podcast, I don't want you to be looking on our page looking for content. You should be out experiencing life, getting the sunlight that you need, developing the relationships. This is why I do crisis management, peer work. This is why I like being in the community, because we have FaceTime rather than, and this is a great medium. It's done quite a bit, and I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for the technology side of things, but you get a little bit more doing things in person. And I take that, and I would like people to understand that you shouldn't be on the medium as much as we currently are. Now, with that said,
100%.
I understand too that the world is changing, economic variables, things that are coming into play. Not only that, there's a high level of censorship taking place where individuals who are seeking the proper information to apply to their lives is also being cut out. So what does that mean for the veteran group? And I've shared this quite a bit, is that there has to be the construction of a networked state where goods and services, thought, and the evolution and the trajectory of the veteran base has to align with itself, with this kind of narrative unity, so that we can move forward. Because at some point, as we've seen in the past and through current operations and past operations through IO campaigns, this demographic has been targeted. Now, with that said, with like the page and whatnot, if anyone has anything to share, I will share it. It's just I can't always get to it because where I work, it's literally a dead zone. It takes me 30 minutes to upload a video on my Instagram feed. So it's like, it sucks. And there are parts in the United States that don't have quality internet. And I just happen to work in those areas. But so I would encourage you to continue to do what you're doing. These opportunities here where you're able to share your story and the information, it shows that you're authentic. And that's the beneficial side of having these platforms. And so thankful for it, because it gives us the opportunity to either one, reach a guy in the shadow that could potentially be in the bad spot, and those have been more harmful. And I'd rather see this type of stuff happen, even if others are making growth out of it, where it actually impacts someone's life. And I know that's the power of social media, what it can do to the community. Sure. So don't ever, man, I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Don't ever feel that way.
Yeah, I didn't, I had been following your page for a while, because Clint, I saw it from Clint, and I never got that vibe from you. I mean, that's why I reached out, because I'm like, what this guy's doing is, and that's before I knew like how, your schooling and everything was going. When I originally reached out, I was like, man, this stuff's important. Like I seek this information in my own time. I don't really have outlets or resources or people to ask to go to for like advice like this. So I'm just Google searching, like, and there's a lot of confirmation bias, right? Like what I'm doing, I'm a meat eater, right? I don't have anything. I love vegetables too. I love all food. I'm not a picky eater by any means, but I have, civilian friends and people around me that are vegans, vegetarians, like all this stuff. And it's like, I've had not arguments, but long discussions about the information that I've found about the way I eat. And then they're, and then we get in arguments about, oh, red meat's, you know, a carcinogen and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know, we're all different foods. And this leads me into this. Have you ever heard of the blood type diet?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a little bit about that, because I've read some about it, and I've talked about it on here before about how I think like everyone should know their blood type, right? It should be on your driver's license. And I say that,
I
and
agree that
and
100%.
I say that because it's like, oh, you can say that because in the military you have to know it, but it's like, why don't we know it, right?
Oh my gosh, 100%. If you're in an automobile accident, like if you don't have a Red Cross card in your wallet and you're knocked unconscious, like they got to figure that out. Obviously, they'll give you probably a universal donor,
Sure,
but
right.
nonetheless, like, I mean,
but
I
like,
agree,
why
it's super
not? Like,
important.
why not? It's easy. You can find out right at birth, dude. Like, put it on the
Mhm.
birth certificate. Put it in. It might be. I mean, I think it might be actually on your birth certificate. No, it's
It's a good question. I do not know the answer to
okay.
that.
I don't think so,
But
man.
anyway, everyone should know it. And which led me down this rabbit hole. You know, I think about like the most extreme cases. What's that movie where that army unit was up in the well, it wasn't Korengal, but it was like they were in this terrible position, that fob that was in the middle of
Oh,
the
was it
Oh,
Red
Outpost?
Platoon with Clint Ramashaw?
yes,
The
yes.
Outpost?
So
Yeah, the
they
Outpost
do
movie.
so they were doing like direct line in from blood,
Mhm.
like, you know what I mean? And they could do that because they knew their
Fucking
blood
crazy.
types, right? Like that's crazy. But like I always think about worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I wish I knew, like if me and my brother were out in the middle of nowhere, you know, on a work delivery and we get in a car accident, he's bleeding out. And you know what I mean? Like that's, I know
Yeah.
we're going extreme here,
No,
but
I
it's
get
like,
it, man.
I don't know. I don't like, we actually did, you can get on Amazon these test kits where you can actually figure out, you prick your finger and
Yep.
it reacts, you know, the whatever, and it'll tell you what blood type you have. But I'm just curious what you know or might have learned about like the whole blood type diet and
Sure.
how foods can possibly react different for people.
So science does not back the blood type diet, right? There's not like there's not strong evidence to suggest what the blood type diet is saying. However, all of these diets come from somewhere, right? So I think the important takeaway from the blood type diet is everybody does have individuality at some point, right? Like some people do digest meat better than others. Some people
Right.
digest fiber better than others. Some people can do really good on a high fat diet. Other people don't, right? They just gain a ton of weight. Like every single person is different. That's why cookie cutter diet plans and diets just don't work. But I absolutely do think there is some validity to that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what aspects of the blood type diet I think are good and which ones are bad. I would just say that the blood type diet, again, eliminates a ton of stuff. I always caution people to stay away from diets that eliminate a ton of things. Just
Right.
because if your body can, like, for example, on the blood type diet, I'm B negative and it tells me to stay away from legumes, which are beans. I eat a
Right.
lot of beans. I love beans and rice. I add beans to a lot of dishes, baked beans when I barbecue. And beans don't cause me any distress. Like I don't get super bloated. They don't give me diarrhea. Like I've had literally no
Holy shit, dude.
downsides to eating beans. And if I was to listen to the blood type diet and cut beans out of my life, well, I'd be losing a ton of fiber, a ton of vitamins and minerals, and a ton of like plant protein from that food source for no reason, essentially, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no
Right.
indication metabolically or physically that those cause me problems. So there could be some foods, though, on the blood type diet that do cause you problems. So I would say with any diet, and this is just a human's habitual diet in the first place, identify foods that cause you issue, right? If you're thinking about eliminating something or just trying to stay away from something to be healthy, first identify foods that cause you actual problems and cut those out first, because those are the only foods that should be cut out. All other foods have a place. That's why I think, I mean, as an omnivore, humans are meant to eat meat and vegetables. Like I can see the vegan argument. Like you can be a healthy vegetarian and you can even live and exist on a carnivore diet. Although I think that diet is extremely risky for a number of reasons. But I eat a ton of red meat. I mean, I'm a huge deer hunter and I eat venison probably every week, and it's preparation methods matter, portion sizes matter, right? Like,
Yeah.
is your whole plate meat with like a piece of broccoli, or is
Yeah.
it
Right.
like, like a 5-ounce piece of meat with like whole grains and then some veg on the side? And then you're getting all these vitamins and minerals, Things are absorbing at different rates. Like there's a lot that goes into it. But I really believe that we should allow yourself to eat as much as your body's able to eat in terms of diversity, because that is how you get all of the vitamins and minerals and those macronutrients that your body really needs in the right proportions. But on like keto diet, carnivore diet, vegan diet, like you're cutting out a whole bunch of foods that your body could digest without issue, and it's really limiting you. And that's what you don't want. It also comes down to your long-term goals, right? Like, you know, all of a sudden one study will come out and it'll say, oh, well, if you eat meat, it's going to take 10 years off your life. But if meat is your primary protein source and you like athletic activities where you need to build muscle, well, do you want to be like a scrawny vegan, but live an extra 10 years? And this is assuming, let's just say, and I don't agree with all that science, but let's just say, just for sake of argument, if you were a vegan, you'd live 10 years longer, okay, for sake of argument. But you won't be able to build nearly the muscle mass that you'd be able to just based on testosterone and protein sources if you were to eat meat. Well, do you want to be a skinny vegan and live to be 100, or would you rather be a more muscular athletic individual and live to be 90, right? So like there's all these things that go into play, and it has to do with your goals, physique and otherwise, and your food preferences.
Yeah.
So that's where it's super tricky. But I mean,
yeah.
And like, it's hard for, I'm fortunate because I have the education in nutrition to really like dive into the science, know what sources to look at, kind of know how to break down what studies are good, what studies are bad, to make a more educated decision, and to admit, and especially to admit when I don't know something, right? That's huge. I feel like so many people are in these camps, they're like, my way or the highway, this is right, you're fucking wrong. And I'm like the person that like, I'm pretty sure that this is the best advice, but I'm not going to tell you, with certainty that it's 100%. Because like, as the more science you learn, the more you realize that there are very few absolutes. There's always exceptions to rules.
Yeah.
Especially with the human body. I mean, for every one, individual testimony of this worked for me, I could find you an opposite case. For every carnivore that says, well, my carnivore diet, reversed heart disease and it made me live longer. Well, I'll go find a vegan that says the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And I'll go find somebody on the keto diet that says the same fucking thing. So it's very hard to follow people that have these testimonies, right? And that's why I really still like looking at large bodies of research that have a lot of human data, because that's more trustworthy. It's got a lot of human data.
Yeah, I wish that, and not to get like, conspiratorial on this, but as when I research things, it's like, oh, not a lot of studies have been done on this. I'm like, well, why not? Like it's nutrition. If this is, right. No, I know that. And that's why I'm like, why aren't these things being funded? Because if you're talking about the overall health of a population, like what you're fueling yourself with, it has to be near the top, if not the top, with exercise and good sleep. Like,
Absolutely.
That's frustrating for me, because I'm like, we have plenty of funds to do every kind of study on this that you want to do. It's like, why aren't we doing this? But
yeah, man, that's like a whole, that's a whole rabbit hole that would take a whole nother podcast, is like, where are we diverting our money? Like, honestly, I feel like the United States, and this is one of my like political-ish opinions that has changed over the years. I feel like the United States is fully capable of providing healthcare, like quality healthcare, to every American. I feel like we have the means necessary to do that. And I think it's a shame that somebody that's like a hardworking American, like that has a family to support, can like get in an automobile accident and then not have the healthcare coverage, and it just ruins their whole life. And it's like, or they have something that was out of their control, like some health problem that just came up, and it's tragic to me. And it's like, man, if we really want a strong populace, right? Like, you got to make sure they're healthy. If you want able-bodied people to work, and you want to fill the workforce and lower the cost and burden of the, obesity, type 2 diabetes, these things are costing the country a fortune. Yeah. And if we redivert some funds into teaching people, I mean, do either of you remember anything important about the nutrition course that you took, probably as like a sub course in your health class in high school?
I was just thinking about that actually. Before. I'm like, just a food pyramid. That's really
which is a lie. Which is a lie.
Yeah,
should be going back to Edward
flipped,
Bernays.
But
yeah. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like, what do you actually remember from that? And that was like a 2-week portion of a half semester course, or like a year-long course. And that's what we're teaching people. Like, people are coming out of high school fucking useless.
Ooh, yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't know anything about their car. They don't know anything about their body, right?
Yeah.
They're out of shape. I mean, like, what are we doing? You know what? It's so frustrating to me. And don't get me wrong. I feel like, there's a bit, the majority of that portion comes down to the parent. You know what I mean?
Right.
The parent should be teaching. But if the parent was set up for failure and didn't autocorrect in their adult life to then teach their kids, they're relying on the school system to teach their children how to be productive adults, and it makes it really hard. I mean, kids know way more about their cell phone than they know about their own health. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The social determinants of health aspect, I try to look into that along with these other compounding frameworks that have now introduced a whole slew of things. Like I was reading, I can't cite the source, but there's been a correlation between the reduction of recess time and mental illnesses like ADHD. And like, for example, because I work in the school system, so I see all the things that we're discussing, and it's pretty scary, man.
I believe it. And I mean, society in general these days is just like, it's so different from when I think all of us grew up.
Yeah.
It's just a strange time. All these social factors at play all at once, with social media, and now chat GPTs entering the mix. Curious to see where that goes.
No, I have a couple of questions with that.
Yes.
But I don't want to, I do have a research question, not to cut you off. Have you done any research on the growing field of epinutrients?
Like epigenetics?
Yes.
Yeah, so a little bit. So essentially, for those of the listeners that don't know, essentially epigenetics you can think of as like a light switch on and off, okay? Yeah. And certain behaviors, whether it's exercise or nutrition, can turn on or off these epigenetic markers, which then as you procreate and have children can be passed on. So if your epigenetic marker for something beneficial is off because you don't exercise or don't eat right, you can then pass that on to your offspring, who will then be born with it off. But the more of these beneficial ones you can flip on through proper behaviors, and there's various epigenetic markers and various methods to turning them on and off that you can do. But yeah, absolutely, nutrition plays a big role in those. So I did take a semester course on like nutrition and genetics, and a big portion of that was epigenetic. That field of research is super fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets deep. I mean, what's great about nutrition is you can get as deep or as like on the surface as you want. And I try to really keep, especially on social media, it at surface level, because a lot of people, again, their highest level of nutrition education was that 2-week course we just talked about in high school. So they're not coming into it with like a firm understanding. So like even breaking down like what a carbohydrate is, what a fat is, what a protein is, I think that's really important. A lot of people go, I hear this all the time at the hospital, like, oh, I cut carbs. And I'm like, oh, all right. Like, so what do you eat? And they're like, well, like in the morning, I'll have some fruit and like some eggs. And I'm like, all right, so carbs in the morning, fruit. And then like, well, how about lunch? And they're like this, and I'll have maybe like, I'll eat that on like a bed of veggies. I'm like, more carbs, non-starchy vegetables. That's right, carbs. But like, because people don't know what carbs are. People think bread, pasta, rice, like the obvious ones, right? But like, just that is alarming. Like, okay, we don't even know all these foods that are carbohydrates. And I don't mean that to talk down on anybody. I just think it identifies this huge like lack of knowledge, because I mean, I love what I do, but at the same time, I almost wish I didn't have a job in it. You know what I mean? Because I wish people had the level of education that they should have, because we'd have a better society. We'd have a better, stronger military. We'd have a better workforce. I firmly believe this down to my core, that we would have a less violent, less problematic society if people were healthier, if they were exercising more. We'd have less suicides, less depression, less mental health problems, because people would feel better, right? And they'd be taking care of their bodies. So it's a huge, huge area that I think we could improve upon.
Yeah, that's the same way I feel about mental health. Like whenever it's become more of a spectacle, right? It's like, oh, you work with veterans. I don't want to, not in the way that I do, because it's detrimental to the soul. So I feel that quite a bit. But going back to the epinutrients and the epigenetics, one of the other areas of study that I do is in intuitive, like intuition, right? The executive
Mhm.
decision making processes. And the reason why I'm interested in that is because we're able to create artificial conditions out of, the a digital ecosystem, right? So we have two identities, right? Well, not two identities. Let's just say we have two forms of ways to look at who we are, right? We're netizens, right? People on the internet, and then we're you know human physical beings, biological beings.
Yep.
But it seems that the netizen role has taken quite a bit of the has become more of a primary, right? So these biological things, this flesh is now just an avatar, so to say, an avatar that has real world consequences that we're actually not seeing.
Right.
And one of the frameworks that I've been attempting to develop is a framework that I call the ultra compounded operations framework, where we look at social mimetic and epigenetic entropy, where we have massive amounts of disorganization within organized states that's leading to a thing called waste variability. And the waste variability is just reactions and responses to things that either one are from adversaries or internal or actual individualized as a result of information transfers through giving birth to the environment. But the thing is that the social and the mimetic, right? The ability to propagate certain types of information behaviors impacts the way our social construction or our social reality is constructed. And as a result of that, it impedes quite a bit of things like our decision making abilities. And then you add in the whole slew of things where we don't have proper nutrition, we don't have proper education on what we should do to enhance that. And one of the things that I go back to is what I've been trying to go back to is this idea that we never really ask the question, what does a secure, what does a good mental health framework look like? What does a good model of being human looks like? And,
Sure.
and part of that mechanism is that like, for example, like the whole chat GPT thing, for decades and decades, we've been fed artificial intelligence is bad. Yeah, it can be bad, right? But look at all the things that technology has done. Look at all the things that software has done. It's done more beneficial things. We just happen to naturally look at all the bad as a result of our heuristics and our ability to survive and wanting to survive and procreate, right? So that's that evolutionary perspective. The other aspect that I'm looking at is if this mechanism continues, right? This mechanism of constant entropy through our biology. What does a reverse look like? What does it take to reverse that on a mass scale? And one of the things that I'm coming to contend with is it can't be done on a mass scale. It's no longer, that's not evolution. That's not
Right.
like proper trajectory. So what is going to end up happening is in the next, well, this is my opinion. I think that on some level, humans, for some odd reason that we can't explain, are beginning to kind of come together. And that coming together between different peoples and different ideas and mixes of genetics is what's going to be our way out of it. I don't the ecosystems are too corrupted
Yeah.
to try to revert back. And that's why I believe in the whole network state of ideas where you create the goods and services for a particular group of people. And then there's a highly vetted process where you allow newer types of information and newer types of vendors to come in to distribute a potential series of goods and services and networks so that it doesn't corrupt this new evolution taking place toward a better place. And it's just a hard thing to do because, again, you have to compete with a whole host of literal bot armies, entire institutions, influencers that don't have the best interest for
Influencers.
people, and then identity politics plays a huge role into it, right? Me and Paul, I'll shut up here in a minute, but me and Paul, we sat down with this. They're just next level guys, but one of the guys' name is Pat Ryan, and he states, you're more than your identity. And I'm a firm believer in that you're more than this flesh meat that and all the mechanisms that you put into it, right? Just yeah, I was a Marine, but am I just a Marine? No, there's more to me than just that component. And the final
As
thing that
Shrek would say, you're an onion with lots of layers.
yeah, pretty much. And the other aspect is humans haven't reached their full biological potential, and like we're not done. Like I'm a firm believer that what we write in like comic books and that's considered
Yeah.
science fiction. What,
I mean, you
dude?
see that in the athletic field. I mean, every sport you can imagine is only progressing in the science of understanding of like human biology and physiology, which is crazy to me. Like I've been into ultra running lately, so I'm reading this book right now on ultra running, and just learning about all the science that goes into like, oh yeah, we created this special incline treadmill and took the best trail runners and we're measuring their cadence and their stride and their foot impact to like make sure that they can learn how to run like efficiently for longer. So like humans could do like 500-mile foot races. And you're just like,
Whoa.
like that's
Yeah,
fucking crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. I don't think we've reached our full potential yet.
Yeah, and so under the conditions that we're currently living in, we're not going to see that. So I look forward. Like I have some concepts that would like to bring to the table, not today, but that do look into that and how human optimization, not like, oh, you can do this life hack where if you sleep 30 minutes during
Yeah,
between 1 and 2 o'clock,
like
you can perform
biohacking.
at 4. Yeah, no, nothing like that. It's just the conditions have to be correct. And
For sure.
I mean, look at what it takes just to teach and train just an individual infantryman, much less a freaking Olympian athlete or an
Yeah.
operator. There's so much that goes into it.
And to
But
be
how,
honest with you, I feel like it's a huge sacrifice too. One of the things that, most of the people I work with, they're just like everyday people like, like you and me, right? Like I'm not working with top tier athletes trying to win gold medals. As fun as that would be, I don't really know if I'd enjoy it because to be at that caliber, to reach that level of human optimization you're referring to, you have to give up so much. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you're like, even with, if we just look at nutrition alone, exercise, sleep, all the other sciences aside, just nutrition. I mean, the timing of every single nutrient down to the amount of vitamin A, the number of carbohydrates, the timing, it needs to be so precise that it can become so stressful and overwhelming to the everyday person. Like, don't get me wrong, it is awesome, like to be the best you can be, but you can get to, what if you could be 75% of your potential and it be like fairly easy, right? Like not super strenuous, like you feel like you can just do it every day, seamlessly. Like there's going to be harder days where you need a little bit more discipline to make it happen, but like, hey, 75% of my absolute max, like that's pretty good if I can maintain that for like a long period of time. And that's something I really try to emphasize with my clients, and just what I try to put out on social media is that is doable, because I'm the type of person that sometimes I can even get down on myself, like, oh, I'm not hitting all my goals. I'm not being as good as I should be because I could be better than this. But it's like, it kind of defeats the purpose of now I'm creating negative emotions inside myself
yeah,
and getting down on myself because I'm not trying to win any gold medals. Like my goal, I like exercising because I like seeing what my body's made of, right? And like capable of. Two, I just like being outside and having fun. Like I just like adventuring. And three, I just want to be healthy for as long as I can. I want to be able to, go outside and play with my kids when I have kids. No kids yet. But when I do, I want to be able to go outside and like play with them. And if they have kids, I want to be able to play with my grandkids. I don't want to be like the old man that's broken down at like 65, right? Like I retire and now I can't enjoy any of my retirement money. I
Yeah.
can't do
Yeah.
I can't go climb a mountain. I have to drive around in a golf cart or a wheelchair because I didn't take care of myself. So that's really what I try to emphasize is like,
You summed it up in a quote you said on that post about like it's not, you'll know what you said, but I'm just gonna summarize. It was
yeah, no,
something about
please,
like
please.
it's just something about like it's not about the amount of years that you live, it's
Mm,
about like the quality of your life
yeah,
while
it's
while
not about
you're
adding years to your life. It's about adding life to your years.
there. You go.
yeah,
Yeah. And I was
100%.
just
yeah.
like, damn, dude, like
Hell yeah,
that's it. Like that is what it's about. And I think too, like you're talking about like super athletes and all that, like not only is there so much that goes into that, but for that individual, how much life, like yeah, you're specializing in doing that, and that's incredible and amazing. And anybody that like hates on that is, is a loser, dude. Like this person is
For
trying
sure.
to shooting for the moon and they're getting there. But
Absolutely.
what are they sacrificing by doing that? What other areas of their life do they not have time for because they're
Right.
so invested in that? And
There's an
that's fine.
opportunity cost to every decision you
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
Right. And that's fine if that's what you choose to do.
Mhm.
You just, as long as you're aware of what you're sacrificing, then, then go get it. But
For sure. I mean, so this is just a personal thing of mine is like, I've realized that I'll probably never be great at any one of my hobbies. Like I'll never be the best because I have so many. So like when it's fall in Wisconsin, I'm in the woods, bow hunting and deer hunt. Like I live for that. I've done that since I was a kid. That's what I live for. But that means I'm not training as hard in the gym. It means I'm not snowboarding until, like hunting season's over. It means I'm not surfing. And when snowboard season, like I'm not doing other winter activities. Like I'll never be a good ice fisherman because I'm always snowboarding. And then in the summer, I'm running and doing various other things. But like I have so many hobbies that I personally love doing. I like being pretty good at more things than being really good at just one thing. And I'm just like, that's another thing I've found out over the past couple of years about myself because I get down on myself and be like, man, I'm just like I'm not like super good at this thing or that thing. Like I'm not really super good at anything, but I'm like pretty good at a lot of stuff. And I was like, yeah, but I'm cool with that because I like doing a lot of stuff. I don't want to just be really good at just one thing and just do that all the time because then the sacrifice is doing all these other things I love doing. But it all comes down to what, like you just said, it all comes down to what that person wants to do.
Yeah.
That template is like not, I don't mean to sound bad, but it's like a medieval template, right? You're born, your father, you were born, your father was a metallurgist or a
Yeah,
blacksmith. That's what you're going to be, and you got to be
for
the best.
sure.
Now that's not the case. But your genius is nutrition and science and stuff like that. So
Right.
I mean, you're good at that. That's really great.
Yeah.
I can't use my body like I used to, and that gets me down like in the gym. Like I'm not, no more 500-pound deadlifts, no more 400-pound squats, no more, because it's just not, my body has been used up in a different way, and I'm okay with that. So I'm not harping on that. And plus too, man, I got to learn how to develop this damn thing because this is not always going to be where
Right.
it's at.
Right. And that's another good point that I try to bring up with my clients is when you have the basic understanding, the foundational level of nutrition understanding, like for example, you understand macronutrients well. You understand carbohydrates, fat, protein. You kind of know what sources are better than others. You know what proportions to get them in. You know how to calculate your own body's needs. Like how many calories do I need in a day? And then what percent of those calories should be protein? What percent should be carbohydrates? And when is it okay to eat like more refined carbohydrates, like sugary things, right? Well, the answer is like time it around exercise. That's typically the best time to do that. Well, once you have that, then as your life changes, if you're no longer in sport or you have a kid and all of a sudden you're super busy because you're a parent or you're 60 and your knee's injured, you'll be able to adjust and fluctuate your nutrition plan and it'll ebb and flow with life because any rigid plan is never gonna hold up because life happens. And that's really important. That's why my programs and what I try to put out on social media is really education based because I really firmly believe that with education, you have power.
Yeah,
Dude.
absolutely, man.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Dude, I feel so fucking motivated now.
Yeah, I told Jose.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm going to go work out after this again, dude. Seriously, man.
No, I'm glad to hear it, man. I mean, I love it. I'm a firm believer in it. Like, that's why I've stuck it out. Like, nutrition by no means is a high paying career, but I love it, and I'm not stressed out at work, and it brings me happiness. So, like, to me, that's all I could ever ask for. Like, I'm fucking happy, and like to me, that's more important than anything else.
Oh yeah, man.
Do you guys have any nutrition specific questions? Like, maybe throw some, because again, I don't know what you don't know, like what do you think would be beneficial for your listeners? Like what's on the top of your head?
Sorry, Jose. I kind of, if you want to like, so a big thing like with me is the information that people like get, not what they seek out. Right. So I have a big problem with my parents because I work with them. They're still locked in on this, uh margarine, fat's bad, like real fat is bad, because that's what they were putting out in the 70s and 80s, like stay away from fat, it's gonna, cholesterol is gonna go up, you're gonna have heart failure, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, science, that's not actually true. Like,
Right.
real fat isn't bad. And of course, I know everything's like moderation and everything, but it's hard for me to like convince them of that.
Absolutely.
They still like to, instead of whipped cream, it's Cool Whip, it's this and that. And it's like, can you go into maybe like are these ultra processed and like synthetic things that are out there, are they really as bad as people are making them out to be? Or we ate MREs, and I know there's a bunch of junk in that, like
For
you said,
sure.
our body can run off of whatever we throw in it, but are there things that people should just, avoid?
So avoid is like a loaded phrase in a way, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, all nutrition can be broken down into certain molecules, right? Like nutrients, right? Broken down, they're all biopolymers. Like a protein's a big biopolymer of amino acids. Fat is just a big biopolymer of various lipids chained together, and carbohydrates are biopolymers of individual sugar molecules like glucose, dextrose, things like that. Or sorry, I got off my train of thought, but nonetheless, so it's more or less what proportions we're eating any of these biopolymers in, right? Because if we're getting an overabundance of something that our body can't tolerate, it's going to do something wacky, right? So like sugar's a big one. So like back in the 70s and 80s, like you talked about, when these companies started taking fat out of food, like there's a few things that make food taste really good, right? One is it being sweet, sugar, right? So if you take, and the other one's fat, man. I mean, think about bacon, right? Or whole milk for skim milk. But inherently, humans like, no, whole milk tastes better, at least to me, right? Because that's what my body craves. It's nutritious. So to make up for taking one thing out, they put something else in. And that's really what happened in mass proportion back then, is they took fat out and they swapped it with sugar. And there's like this whole debate on there's like history behind it, like which researcher said what and who got bought out by the government and subsidized, and which argument they went with. Because one was saying fat's good, the other one was saying fat's bad, eat sugar. And it was like this whole thing. I think, the most simple rudimentary advice that is pretty bulletproof is eat more whole foods, right? Like the closer the food is to its form and nature, the better it's going to be. Even when it comes to meat, right? Like lunch meat is processed meat, right? So it's been like, sodium added to it, it's packaged, it's wrapped in plastic, versus like I just killed a deer and I cut its fucking tenderloin out and I'm cooking it over a fire,
Right.
And then you got to worry about preparation method, yada yada. But nonetheless, sticking to the food in its most whole form is going to be like the safest bet. Now, when it comes to the fat sugar argument, again, everything's about moderation. And, a lot of research says that super high amounts of saturated fat is a risk factor for heart disease. I still am in that camp. But saturated fat's still important in the diet. Like I said, I eat venison pretty much every day, all week. I eat a fair amount, and I drink whole milk, right? But I watch my saturated fat levels, and I also still look at my blood cholesterol levels. I think the blood cholesterol level reference ranges, they might be a little off, but they're not that far off. So like the recommendation for total cholesterol at most places is like under 200. Well, supposedly back in the day, it was like 300, but that now has since changed. So even if, let's say, the 300 is true, well, that wiggle room's only, like 100 points of cholesterol. So it's not too far off. So I think making sure you stay on top of it. And one thing you can do with the medical technology today is you can get scans of all your vascular system, right? You can see if plaques building up anywhere. Might cost a little bit, but it's definitely worth it. And most research says that if your cholesterol levels, especially LDL, are high, right, you have higher incidence of growing these plaques in your arteries and veins, right, which is risky. So it's just something to be cognizant of. But more research is showing that, well, guess what? If you eat too much freaking added sugar, you also have a higher risk of developing these plaques. So it's not like avoid meat and you're going to completely be in the clear, right? Because there's a vegan that could eat Oreos 5 times a day because Oreos are vegan, and it's like but that's ultra processed and loaded with crap. So like when it comes to sweet foods like butter, right? Or butter versus margarine, right? Like butter's higher in saturated fat, sure. But margarine in particular is a hydrogenated oil, meaning they under immense pressure and heat, they force a hydrogen molecule to bond on and turn it into a solid. They took a liquid at room temperature and turned it into a solid using a whole bunch of stuff that's not natural. You can't just do that in your kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's another rule I like to tell people. If you couldn't make the food in your kitchen, maybe eat it in smaller proportions. It doesn't mean that you need to avoid it, but like don't be eating it all the time, you know, and I don't know how much science goes into that statement, but just like intuitively, right? I feel like that's a pretty good rule of thumb. And you can make a whole bunch of great shit in your kitchen, you know what I mean? But a lot of these ingredients that we're eating in high proportions, like even like healthful bars, like RX bars, macro bars, protein bars, they use all this brown rice syrup and all these other ingredients to make that bar taste good and to be packaged and preserved. So are we eating those nutrients in higher proportions than would originally be found in nature? And I think the answer is yes. That's why I think it's funny when you look at these people that argue for a vegan diet versus the person that's arguing for a carnivore diet, is they use these antidotes of like tribes, human tribes. They're like, well, if we look at this tribe, they eat exclusively meat, and that's why we should be eating exclusively meat. But then I'm like, yeah, but what about these people that they found a different tribe, and that tribe eats nothing but vegetables, and they live long, right? So if you're using the human evolutionary tribal mentality, like I could find an argument for basically any case. You look at the Inuits up in like northern Canada that live off basically whale and seal, and they're basically in a keto diet because their saturated fat's super high. Well, they also die of heart disease pretty early if you look into it, you know, and you can see if you look at a lot of like Inuit populations, right? Just physically, they're typically more overweight. And of course, that makes perfect sense. For you to survive in such a cold environment, you want to have a little extra padding, you know, not to mention that's the food source you have available to you. But it's a very slippery slope using like a single tribe, right? And then these people, they cherry pick data. They find one study that suit their argument, kind of back to what you were talking about, right? With like the confirmation bias, right? It's really, you can find a piece of science that's going to back any point you want to back.
Yeah.
The important thing is being able to stay unbiased, and also to be able to find a cumulative volume of evidence. Like there's a lot of research that says this is probably a good thing. And that's kind of the camp I stay in.
That's a good camp. I feel like that's a good camp. I like that.
I try to be, but it's hard, right? Because again, I am fortunate enough to have gone through the education to give me the ability to be better than the average person at researching these things.
Right.
So it's hard because somebody says like, oh, I did my research, but then you ask them, you're like, okay, what'd you do? And they're like, well, I went to Google and I found like I went to like WebMD and Healthline. And not to say that those are bad sources all the time, but they're definitely not like peer-reviewed journal articles en masse, right? So I think just like to give your listeners just like a super basic research point, if you ever see anything that's clickbait or online, okay, the first thing you should do is see if they cite their sources, because any person that has a strong scientific argument is going to cite their sources. Okay. Then if you really think you're about to make a dietary choice based on something you saw online, if they cite their sources, go to those sources, read through the articles. How many humans were in the study? Was it 5 humans or was it 6,000 humans, right? How long did the study go on for? Who funded the study? These little things, pick it apart, really be critical of the studies, right? Because again, if Coca-Cola paid for a study that says soda isn't bad and they found one thing that said soda wasn't bad, well, guess what? It's going to be boom. Soda isn't as bad for you. And then you read the study and you go, oh, Coca-Cola funded the study. That seems a little suspicious. Maybe I should go try to find another study that says soda's, you know, healthy, that isn't funded by a soda company. So it's doing these things because it's really easy as humans to want to believe something if you want to do it. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, like when I had rhabdo and I wanted to run early, I tried really hard to find research that's going to be healthy to exercise after 2 weeks, you know? But I was like, I had to be really unbiased and play it safe. And the same thing comes down to nutrition, but just making sure that you're getting information from credible people, because there's a lot of opinions flying around on social media. And it's really hard for the everyday person to know what's what, like what's good advice and what's bad advice.
And that's why you exist. Because if you don't want to do the research and you're scared of what you might run into, just hit up Grunt Grub and he'll help you out, you know.
For sure. And it's tricky though. You know, I love to say that like dietitians are the subject matter experts in nutrition, but it's hard because, you know, you can have, I mean, we're all humans, right? Just like any profession. You can have good dietitians and bad dietitians. I mean, I know there's dietitians that swear by plant-based only diets, and there's dietitians that are like, eat more meat, like eat a lot more meat. And they're both dietitians. The one thing you can be sure of for sure, though, is that at a bare minimum, a standard is met from a registered dietitian. They do have a certain level of nutrition knowledge that they were expected to meet through school and that residency. Okay. So even if they're in a certain camp, okay, they will at least feed you credible information and back up their point of argument. It's always up to you as the individual to question. You should question anything, even things I say.
Yeah.
If you're like, that I just don't know if I agree with that, do your research, you know, don't take anybody's word as pure fact, right? Like use it as guidance to get you going, but then let it inspire you to go a little bit further and make sure you're doing the right things, you know? So
yeah, dude, that's valid, man. It's hard to not agree with what you're saying though, just because of the way I believe you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
like I
great.
said at the beginning, I try to be an open book, you know, I try to be as honest as I can.
If not, I'll just get the transcript and run it through ChatGPT.
Bro, so I hadn't used ChatGPT, but the other day, we were on a run and my buddy's like, dude, this thing's crazy. Like you can ask it anything and it's going to feed you like fact check validated data. So I was like, dude, ask ChatGPT what should be my nutrition plan for training for a 32-mile trail race. And what ChatGPT spit out was not far off the mark at all. There were a couple things that were definitely questionable, but I'd say like more than 50% of it was like on the money. It was like solid, like better than like what you just find in a Google search. I mean, it was impressive.
It's a great auto correlator, and it's not a fact verified machine or software, and that's where people get messed up, is that at this point now it gives you adequate information. I think now close to a PhD level.
Isn't that crazy?
It's awesome, and dude, you can do so much with it. Not that, yeah, it's just an amazing tool that you can integrate into everything.
And I think, you know, the way people should approach it, like anything, even talking to somebody like myself, it's like when you're researching a topic and Wikipedia is the first source, right?
Yeah.
Use it as a starting point, because Wikipedia could be a great starting point. It can give you a lot of points to go further on. Like, ooh, okay, I didn't know that. And then take those points and research further. Like ChatGPT, again, because one thing that ChatGPT will never be able to do is identify you as an individual, your specific needs for things that work for you. Because like even with the ultra running nutrition, like it was great, you know, like basic starting point nutrition knowledge. But like if one person isn't able to, let's say, tolerate 60 grams of carbohydrate at any given time during a run, well, then the advice wasn't good, right? But it gives you a place to start looking. Yeah. So you can use people like me, ChatGPT, right? Wikipedia to get that baseline, and then gather more research, right? Like listen to one dietitian, but then maybe listen to a second dietitian, a third dietitian, do your own research, see what else is out there in the peer-reviewed literature, and really build this well-rounded base of backing to your point. Because the more you test your own beliefs, the stronger they'll be. And maybe you're going to find that your belief was wrong and it makes you change your mind. But if you find that you were right, it gives you more ammunition to be defensive of your point, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If somebody can't cite a source on like why they're doing this certain thing, you ask them, like, well, why are you doing that carnivore diet? Well, like, oh, carnivore MD tells me to. But like, okay, but like, do you just trust him point blank, like he's the Messiah? Maybe you do. I don't know if that's a good idea, bro. You know what I mean? Like,
I will say.
It's crazy.
I will say that like with ChatGPT, it's limited. Like for example, it like now that I'm out of the university, like my access to their digital library for primary sources and academic articles is gone. So now I have to like literally either one hack into like
Yeah, use like
academia,
a fellow student's login.
yeah, or go through academia edu to see if it's available for to the public. And,
For
and
sure.
that's one thing that like now that they're integrating like Bing with like Chat GPT, it's giving you a higher scale of sources.
Absolutely.
But those links that it still produces are fake. A lot of them are fake. Like even if you were to like in a prompt, you were to ask it, I need 99.9% accuracy on finding out, what's a healthy what's the proper diet for a 30-year-old Mexican, right? And I want you to cite primary sources. It'll create primary sources that don't exist.
Damn,
Oh
that's
wow.
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you again, even if like the kids that are like producing like bullshit like essays through Chat GPT, those links gotta like you gotta go back and find those
Yeah.
links.
Hopefully the professor doesn't click on them, like I'm gonna
Well,
actually verify this source. This reference list seems suspiciously long
I
for
think
a
they have
3-page
like,
paper.
yeah, they have new softwares that are trying to get through it, but it's pretty easy now. Like if you mess with Chat GPT, like the language, like what's Chat GPT and what's not, but you have
What's
to
not?
spend a lot of time with it. Um, I wanted
What
to
a
ask,
crazy world.
yeah, yeah. I have a question for you. I don't know how
Yeah.
much time you have left, but
As long as you guys need, man, it's a good conversation so far. So
my question is in terms of like TRT. I don't know if you've done any like research and specifically. Uh,
I'm gonna take a piss real fast.
Go for it, bro.
1 second, 1 second.
No problem.
So I personally know some nutrition advice for testosterone, but it's very minimal. In fact, it's probably a letdown to most people to hear that. Like what you can do nutritionally for testosterone is super basic. It's hit all of your goals, especially your micronutrient goals, making sure you're getting enough vitamin A, your B vitamins, your complex vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin C on a daily basis as frequently as possible. A lot of it has to do with sleep too, making sure you're
Yeah,
getting optimal sleep. Now, when it comes to TRT specifically and the clinical implication, I would recommend this book, Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible. Okay, and
Jay
it's by
Campbell.
Jay Campbell. Awesome research or awesome resource. I went through it. Um, a lot of what it comes down to is making sure you have a physician that is willing to actually check your testosterone levels, because a lot of doctors don't do that willingly if you're less than 50 years old, right? Even 40. Like if you're in your 30s and you want your test checked, you have to give a really big argument as to why you want to check, because getting lab work done costs the hospital money. So if they feel like it's unjustified and you don't have like you're not like super lethargic all day or this and that, and you don't have a good justification for getting your test levels checked, a lot of doctors won't do it. I asked to get my test levels checked in the hospital when I had rhabdo, and they wouldn't do it. They're like, "Oh, go talk to your primary." I was like, "You guys are drawing labs 3 times a day. How hard is it just to check my test?" They wouldn't do it. For
Wow.
whatever reason. So a big thing they say in this book, just because one, testosterone just on like an overall population average in men is
Yeah.
dropping like
Oh yeah.
substantially, right? And then you look at the military aspect, a lot of military personnel, men come out low test levels. It's super important to get checked. And then what this book goes over is making sure you have a physician that's in your corner, that's willing to do it the right way and not overdose your testosterone levels, but basically just make up for it. Get a regimen of testosterone that's going to make up for what you're lacking. Like, here's where you should be. Here's where you're at. I'm not going to put you way above. I want to put you right where you should be. Right. And then as your testosterone naturally weans over time, slowly increase your testosterone regimen to, again, keep you where you should be for as long as possible. So I'm all for, so they call it TOT because they call it testosterone optimization therapy instead of replacement therapy. And the whole point of the book is really just to make sure that you have an optimal level of testosterone for as long as physically possible. Because as men, it's such an important hormone. I mean, it is vital. That's a huge part of who we are. So I definitely recommend digging into that resource for anybody that has questions on testosterone, because testosterone outside of the nutrition world is not really my wheelhouse.
Gotcha.
Um, Yeah, and as like I said, from a nutrition standpoint, if you're hitting your bases, right, getting your micronutrients, getting your macronutrients, getting enough sleep, hydrating properly, like especially as a young man, you're doing all the right things. And as an older man, I mean, it's really the same thing. The evidence on certain foods, like I always pronounce it incorrectly, like Tanja Ali, or I might
Yeah,
be able to find it.
yeah,
I
Tonga
think you guys
Ali.
know it. What is it?
Tonga Ali. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So here we go. I was able to flip right to the page because I had it marked, right? So even in this book, and this isn't a nutrition specific book, they say that all of these supplements that you're finding on the market, I mean, essentially there's garbage, right? Like even if it does raise your testosterone by like a couple points, well, that counts as like a test boosting supplement. But like a couple points when the scale's in the thousand, right? Up to 1,000 is not that much. That's like a food like protein has a thermic effect higher than carbs or protein or carbs or fat. So if you eat protein food, of course, it's a metabolism boosting food. It's a fat burning food. But let's say it's only burning 5 extra calories throughout the whole course of a 3,000 calorie day. So it's not lying. It did give you a small gain, but is it significant? Not really. So that's when it comes to all these food sources that are supposed to boost your testosterone. Basically, what the book describes and what most of the research describes is that it's not significant. It's not lying. There are clinical studies that show it raises, but it's not raising by like enough. Unless you can easily incorporate it into your diet and it's cost effective, it's basically not worth your money. Because a lot of them are, some of these supplements are extremely expensive, or to go out of your way to try to find some of these food products and incorporate that in your diet. And then you're going to be miserable eating this thing every day to raise your test level by 3 points. Like not worth it. Not worth it, in my opinion, especially when you could, if you really do have low test, you could go to your doctor and get TOT, right? Or TRT as it's most commonly referred to. Did that answer your question, Jose?
Yeah, it did. I just wanted to get a general scope of it.
Absolutely. I
I've
think it's a
always,
huge deal. And I'm a firm believer of everyone should get their levels checked to make sure that you are in a normal range. I actually personally, I have not been able to get checked yet because I still get my healthcare through the VA, and they have not been like super helpful with letting me get my test levels checked because they don't see any reason to. All my lab works good. I've got plenty of energy. Like I'm still able to physically perform. So they're like, why do we need to check your tests? And I'm like, well, because I was in the military and there's signs there's like mass evidence that in general, men, especially in the United States, have decreasing test levels, and it's getting worse every decade. And there's a different book. Rogan had the author on his podcast. I can't remember her name, but essentially it was all about plastics and how these byproducts of plastics getting into our systems is killing our testosterone.
it's in our DNA now.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I actually, that's one thing I really try to do a good job of is avoid as much plastic as possible, especially like anything that's like, I don't heat anything in plastic.
Yeah.
I don't drink bottled water if it's in the heat, if I can help it, just because that shit scares the shit out of me because I know how important testosterone is.
We joke about that on here about in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Like, stacks of water bottles just out in the sun.
Oh my God, for sure.
And like some of it you could taste.
Absolutely. And if you can taste it, something's fucked up.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I think again, like humans have a good intuition. Like if something's off, you just know it's fucking off, especially if you're drinking out of those water jugs and there was JP8 in there or something.
Oh my God.
They washed them out. You're like, bro, I don't know about this.
Yeah, I frequently tell a story about how JP fluid tainted water bottle, crates came to us, and forever on my third tour, I'm like, man, it smells like fucking gasoline everywhere I go. What the fuck? And like, no, dude, you're just tripping. And I'm like, no, man, just like a constant smell of fucking gasoline. And then
I believe it.
On Cypernet, on Cypernet, they sent out a memo. They're like, oh, by the way, large crates of our water was tainted by JP8 fluid. And I'm like, I fucking told you. It was so horrible, dude. It was crazy. It was just crazy. It was like, it felt like it was like coming out of my skin as I was sweating.
Honestly, you probably were, right? Like after a night of drinking whiskey, when you sweat, you're like,
dude, yeah. It was like, whoa.
I don't know about that.
That's probably, yeah. That's one thing one reason why I don't like going to the doctor is every time I go, it's like they find something and it's just, there was a
Yeah.
period where I was 24 years old, and I was a freaking skeleton with a walking cane, and I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs. I had I had a bad adverse effect to like to modern medicine, because all it did was just make me worse.
Right.
So I mean, at some
Yeah, I
point,
mean, like I said in the beginning, like there's a time and a place to go to the doctor, but I'd be very if there's something that you feel like isn't life threatening and something that you feel like you can take care of on your own, I would definitely try to get in touch with the right, circle of people to solve the problem on your own before heading in. Again, if it's life threatening, I always recommend going to the doctor. If it's
yeah,
something
for
that's
sure.
really concerning you, right? Go see a professional. You can always say no to something the doctor tells you too, by the way. Like if you're in the hospital and they're like, we think you should do this, you can say, let me just wait a couple minutes and make my decision. And you can say no, they're just giving you the best advice that they know. I don't think that any doctor is inherently fucking evil or like doing the wrong things. Like they got into medicine to help people and they're doing what they think is best. Western medicine gets a really bad rap sometimes. And I get it, right? Like, especially with the VA prescribing like all these meds for mental health when there's clearly other alternatives like psychedelic therapies. And it's sad to see because, it's like the whole police thing, right? Like one bad apple, but it makes our whole healthcare system look bad. And I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. Like, like being a dietitian at the VA, I really try to help as many people as I can. The problem is most people I see when you're in the hospital is at that point, unfortunately, a lot of the time the damage is done. Like I'm already dealing with stage 3 kidney disease because the diabetes went unchecked for so long. It's like, oh, if I could have talked to you 20 years ago, then maybe we could have prevented this. Right now, it feels like, I'm putting a Band-Aid on a massive hemorrhage. So, and that's in a lot of cases. And it's the clinical world's tough. So
Yeah.
that's why it's nice having my business because I work with younger guys, and I feel like I'm catching people upstream before the problems sink in downstream.
Is diabetes such a prevalent is that like a prevalent issue? I mean, I know there's
Absolutely. It's like an epidemic in the United States. The rates of type 2 diabetes are just skyrocketing.
now why is that? If
A lot of things, lack of exercise for sure, and then a lot more uncontrolled carbohydrate consumption. So like refined carbohydrates. So not just added sugar, but think like white breads, white pastas, white rice, things that are no longer a whole grain. Our bodies absorb them so fast. So like I'll give you an example. We look at cocaine, right? Because most people know what cocaine is, right? So that's derived from a plant. It's just highly purified and refined, right? If you chopped up the plant that it was made from and just ate it, you would not get the same profound effect, even if you started snorting the chopped up leaves. But over the course of, concentrating it essentially, you derive at the white powder that gives you the rush. Well, sugar is very similar. So the sugar in the United States is derived from two main sources: sugar cane or beets. Okay, now sugar cane is less of a good example than a beet, but if you're to eat a beet that's cooked, okay, in its whole form, like you roast a beet, you eat it, there's so much fiber there that the carbohydrate needs to be released slowly. Like your body has to physically break apart everything to get the sugar. Now it's still a high sugar food and you're going to get a decent blood sugar response from that food. But when they refine the beet down to literally table sugar that you put in coffee or put in baked goods, right, it is absorbed so quick because now you took this big biopolymer, and what our bodies are supposed to do is snip it apart over time. And in doing so, through your intestines, you can absorb the monosaccharides and disaccharides, meaning the 1 sugar units or the 2 sugar units. Those will pass through your membrane and go into your bloodstream. Added sugar is basically broken down to that point already. So as soon as you ingest it, it can go straight into your bloodstream. Opposed to eating a high fiber food that your body literally needs to strip it apart. So like a great example is an apple. If you eat a whole apple, it's got X amount of fructose, okay? If you machine that apple to applesauce, it still has X amount of fructose, the same amount of sugar. If you strip it down further to apple juice, it has the same amount of fructose, except now it's purely concentrated in the juice. So over the course of time in America, we've made so many more refined foods. That's why processed foods gets a bad rap, right? I mean, a lot of food is processed. It's just the level of processing. The way I explain it to my clients is anytime you take work away from your body, right? And you're letting a machine do some of the work, typically the worst off it's going to be for just our general health. Now, performance and athleticism or like sports nutrition is different because then you can leverage that processed food to your advantage. For example, if you only have 30 minutes to eat before a workout, like I did before my run, right? Like I woke up at 5 this morning and I wanted to be like hitting the trail at like 5:45. Well, like I don't have I get up, brush my teeth, like wake up a little bit. Like I'm gonna have like 30 minutes to get something in me for fuel before I start physically working. So I want to make sure that sugar goes from my stomach into my bloodstream as fast as possible because I don't want it in my stomach when I start running because I'm going to have more blood in my legs, less blood at my stomach to digest it, which can cause some serious problems. So then added sugar is fantastic because I know it's going to go straight through me into my blood. Boom, I've got gasoline ready to go. The problem is most Americans don't do that. Most Americans sit at a desk for work and they drink soda and eat white bread on sandwiches and, insert whatever else junk food you could imagine, and then they don't exercise. So it's just this constant spike of blood sugar. Now, there's two ways that blood sugar can get into the cells to use it as fuel, okay? First is insulin. That's like the most commonly known one, right? Is you eat a high sugar meal, your insulin's going to release, your pancreas is going to release the insulin, and obviously it's a complex process, but that insulin essentially is a key to open a door in the cell so the sugar can go in. There's one more key to open a door, and that's exercise. So we know through exercise, your cells can actually absorb sugar really efficiently, and it gives your pancreas a break. But if you don't exercise and you eat these high sugar meals constantly, your pancreas, almost like a muscle, is going to wear out and break down. And then you become very, it's called insulin resistance for a reason, right? Your body is less sensitive to the insulin response. So your body has to produce more and more and more and more and more until it eventually just poops out. And then you're a full-blown diabetic that needs to take insulin treatment just to deal with the sugar problem. So that's why it's like, people are like, don't eat sugar. But I'm like, yeah, but you can eat sugar if you exercise. So like that's one example of why you could still eat it. It's all about timing and understanding what foods to eat when.
That reminds me of
I didn't mean to cut you off, Tyler.
No, so it's funny we're getting into this. I follow this guy. I'm not gonna say his page until I hear what you say, and then doesn't matter if I plug it or not. But this guy wears a blood glucose monitor.
Yeah,
right.
CGM.
Yeah, so he eats certain foods, certain combinations of foods, and shows his graph on like if it spiked his blood sugar. And so, I mean, are you like agreeing with what he's saying? Is basically if you constantly spike your blood sugar, without exercise, that is what leads to diabetes or can?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Now the thing is, if you'd have to put a CGM on yourself to see what foods do that to you personally, because everybody's spikes are going to be different with certain foods. There are some generalized trends, right? Like if you and me both consume 50 grams of straight sugar,
yeah,
we're both going to get a spike. It's right. Especially if we're not moving, right? Yeah. How big the spike is could change a little bit, but absolutely. And I think it's great that people put those, themselves out almost as like a one person study in a way.
Yeah. It's just fascinating to me to see, like, for sure. Obviously, if you know anything about food, what he's going to eat is most likely going to spike him. But there are certain ones, especially like, these like artificial sweeteners, or like even the more natural ones it's like a sugar substitute that don't like spike. And it's like, some of the thing, it's fascinating that he's doing that. Cause I'm like, I wouldn't have thought,
because then it gets people thinking, because you're like, oh, wow, now maybe I should avoid some high sugar foods. Right.
But it's weird though, too, because he'll do certain foods like that, spike them, then he'll eat it with like a protein or a high fiber, and it doesn't do that as much.
That's where the balance of a meal is really important. And that's a big thing I work on with clients when they're prepping their meals for the week, especially around exercise. Because like, sometimes you want the meal to be higher in protein, but you also still want some carbohydrates in there to replenish your glycogen stores. But how much should I eat? Right. And like, what type of protein should I get, or what type of carbohydrate should I have when? And that's That's the nitty gritty that I have so much fun with playing around. But that's where the individuality comes into play. It's like, how much is this person exercising? When are they exercising? And then, for the person that's really busy, that doesn't have a ton of time to exercise, the more you stay away from refined foods, the better off you're going to be in terms of general health, right? You're going to get more fiber. You're going to have less severe glucose spikes. It's just going to be overall better for your health. You have more wiggle room to eat junk food when you exercise hard because your body needs it, right? Your body can tolerate it, which is part of the reason I fucking exercise.
That's what I saw your post, and you were eating like a stack of pancakes, and you're like, "This is why I train." Like, and I'm like, "That's great." Like,
yeah. I got a little bit more wiggle room. Like my favorite breakfast after my run is like American fries, like hash browns, like just straight white potatoes and omelet, and then this buckwheat pancake, man, that I just dump syrup on. And I love it, and that's what after a super hard trail run, that's exactly what my body wants. It's like, you just burn off all this reserve, like refill me up. And I'm like, great, now I get to eat a meal I love.
Yeah, I remember seeing years ago when Michael Phelps was like winning all the Olympics things, like there was a picture of his breakfast and I was like, holy, like this dude's just housing it. But you don't realize how much fuel he's burning, know, during his training and whatever. But
absolutely. I mean, the body's like a car, right? And it needs constant fuel and oil and tranny fluid and differential fluid and all this cool stuff to make sure you're optimally performing.
Yeah. It's good stuff. It's fascinating. I know, like, and that's why I'm glad resources like you are out there, because it can be overwhelming, especially if you're not willing to try for yourself or you're afraid to like get into something and make mistakes and mess up, but yeah, dude, one more thing, or, I don't want to, I feel like I'm just picking your brain on stuff. Like,
no, cool, man.
Is it eating before bed?
That is a myth that has been dispelled.
Okay.
So it does not matter. What really matters is total nutrients during the day.
Okay.
Right? A lot of people, right, that evening meal before bed was big, and it was putting them over their threshold on a lot of stuff, right? Calories, fat, carbohydrates, right? And again, it depends what you're eating before bed. So obviously you're about to go lay down, right? Which means your body is not going to be moving. So refined carbohydrates like white bread, white rice, sugar, man, if you eat those in high proportions and your blood glucose spikes because you're about to go lay down, that can be detrimental.
And then you become inactive because you're laying down, you're not burning any of it.
But if you have like a meal high in, like, let's say casein protein, right, which is a slow digesting protein like cottage cheese, well, then you're doing your body a favor because now you're introducing a new protein source that's going to break down slowly during your fasting period to rebuild those muscles slowly over time, so your body can slowly take those amino acids in and then use them directly. So it's all about strategy. Like, if you're staying within your calorie goals and you're eating foods that aren't going to do anything detrimental, like refined carbohydrates, then all good. You can eat right before you go to bed. You can eat and then immediately go to bed. No big deal. But if you're going to go eat a high sugar meal, questionable.
Yeah.
Unless you didn't eat anything all day. Like if your body was starving, let's say you fasted all day and you're about to go to bed. Well, if you eat a high carbohydrate meal, then no big deal. Your body needs all that energy. It's going to do everything it can to get that sugar where it needs to go.
Yeah, I remember, like, when I was lifting heavier, I would always wake up just starving. Like my gut felt like it was touching my spine.
Like
I started, like I started eating like, high protein meals before, like pretty close to bedtime, and I would wake up and I would feel great. My muscles weren't as sore, and I'm like, I didn't know the science behind it, but I was just like, this can't be bad for me
Yeah. And like you can use your body as a litmus test. If all of a sudden you start seeing pounds go up on the scale you're not trying to gain weight, well, like something in your diet's probably wrong, right? You're probably overeating. So let's identify that problem first. Is like your midnight snack causing you to gain the pounds, or could we maybe lighten some calories up earlier in the day? Right? Like your weight and your energy levels are your best gauge as to how you're feeling. And then from there, you can do things like getting a DEXA scan to get your muscle mass, right, identified. You can do blood work to see what are my cholesterol levels, what's my hemoglobin A1C, what's my blood sugar at, fasting. And then you can start making other tweaks. But like just on a general level that's free and you can do daily is what's my energy like and what's my weight like? Right? Am I getting fat? Do I have terrible energy? Okay, well, something's off.
Right on. Yeah,
But
I
yeah, like, I
always
mean, you did it intuitively. You woke up and you felt better. So obviously you fixed the problem. And I'm assuming you didn't get fat doing it. You just
no,
felt
I
better,
was like,
which is
dude, I
a
hate
win.
waking up feeling like I'm dying because I'm
For
starving.
sure.
Yeah,
Like,
dude. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Your body needed it. And I'm a huge believer the body tells you what it wants. That's why
right.
humans instinctively like high sugar foods and high fat foods, because evolutionarily, those are high calorie foods. And our bodies want calories, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
the majority of human existence has been like just constantly trying to find food, like periods of starvation and then abundance, right? Like eat a whole deer, go 3 days without a deer. Eat a deer, go 5 days without a deer, or a woolly mammoth, or a hairy rhinoceros, whatever it may be. So now we live in this world where like food's always available. Again, not trying to detract from people that have food insecurity, but like for most people, like food isn't their main concern every single day for survival. So it's way easier to overeat than it is to undereat.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty in tune with like what my body tells me I need. And I've never been a huge like breakfast guy. In the military, I was because of like, PTing and stuff. But
For
like
sure.
on my daily regimen, like I just black coffee and water in the morning. And that's not because what all these podcasters are telling you to do now. I'm not hungry until sometimes like 2 p.m. And
Oh,
then I eat the majority of my food. I don't get bogged down because I try to avoid garbage most of the time. And
sure.
then I'll eat like a smaller dinner usually, and like that's my thing. That's what I do. I don't even think about food. Like, and
It,
I
that's
maintain
what
pretty much.
in the nutrition world, that's what we call intuitive eating, right? Like you're not doing it for any specific reason. You're doing it because that's what your body wants. And clearly you're probably at, reaching most of your goals, right? Like if you have a fitness goal, I hope that in doing that routine for you, it's working out fine and you just don't have an issue with it. That's perfect, man. Like that's the goal everyone should have, is like, I'm healthy, right? Like I'm in the physical shape I want to be in for the most part. I don't have any detrimental health concerns. And whatever I'm doing nutritionally is working out for me.
Yeah.
That looks different from you than it looks for me, or from,
Yeah.
Jose, or from person A, B, C, you name it, right? It can be different for everyone. But it's good to get that to that intuitive level where you're so in tune with how your body feels that you know where to adjust. Oh man, I wake up feeling hungry. I'm going to eat some more food at night, right? Especially high protein. It's going to break down slower. Well, that solved the problem. Fantastic.
Right. You wake up, your face is all puffed up because you ate too much salt before bed or something, like I'm
Yeah,
like, I
you
know
didn't
what
sweat
did that.
enough.
I look like a.
Yeah, and your blood pressure's at like 180, and you're like, oh boy,
Yeah.
that's an issue.
That's why I like microdosing. It stabilizes your appetite. Like you're not eating because out of anxiety. You're just
For
right.
sure.
It's great.
Absolutely. Well, cortisol is another fascinating topic, and it's one that comes up a lot with my tactical clients, like police officers. So, like the natural response to a cortisol spike, right? When you come into a really stressful environment, immediately following that, you get hungry, and your body craves super energy
Yeah,
dense foods like
yeah,
fat and sugar, right? Well, traditionally, again, going back to human evolution, a cortisol spike was probably like, oh shit, there's a fucking like mountain lion behind a rock,
Yeah.
right? And
yeah,
I
yeah.
either gotta kill that son of a bitch or I gotta run. Either scenario, you're going to expend a lot of calories. Like you're going to burn a ton of calories fighting a mountain lion, or you're going to spend a ton of calories running away from a mountain lion. But in today's world, you're sitting behind a desk and your boss sends you an email that says, meet in my office. Or
Oh
your girl
shit.
says, we need to talk. Just that.
Yeah.
We need to talk. And instantly, boom, cortisol spikes, right? The evolutionary response happens. Well, immediately, as soon as your body comes down from that cortisol spike, you're going to feel hungry. But if you're sitting at your desk, you don't need
Yeah.
all that food, but your body tricks you. Your body
Yeah.
thinks you're hungry, but really you're just making up for that
Or
cortisol spike. But you didn't just expend a ton of energy.
or you're sitting there watching the news cycle, the fear mongering news cycle, and you're just crushing bags of chips because you're
Yeah,
like,
day in and day out, right? And then you turn
yeah,
the TV off, but you go on Instagram, and it's the same shit. And then you turn your
right,
phone off, it's like your friend tells you something. You're like, oh my, you can't escape it.
right.
That portion, especially like in the mental health spectrum, like a lot of people that I see have developed that deep fat tissue that comes from, and again, there's that word, that toxic stress, because it's a continuous
Absolutely.
thing. They don't know how to supplement that. And I see that a lot, quite a bit. And when you're heavy, there's a whole host of ailments that come with, your knees and your
Absolutely.
back, and them wanting not to exert any more force.
It's
Yeah, I
it's
see it.
such a positive feedback loop, right? Like one thing leads to another thing that just keeps exacerbating the problem. It doesn't make it better. It makes it worse, right? You gain weight and then you feel more lethargic. You're more lethargic, you gain more weight. It keeps going until you literally like throw a wrench into it and stop it from happening, and then work your way up, working uphill to reverse the cycle. That's why it's better to get on it when you're younger, so that you don't have to work harder when you're older to make up. That's like a big weight loss problem, is like, if somebody's really overweight, they don't realize that, well, it took time to put that. You didn't gain, unless you have like a health condition where you gain a ton of weight, like in like a matter of a couple months. But like most people acquire that added weight over years, but then they want to lose it in a 40-day crash diet. It's like, dude, it took you years to put it on. It's probably going to take you years to take it off, right? That's what makes weight loss sustainable, is doing it slowly and controlled over time, so your body can adjust slowly to its new weight. If you starve your body really quick and you drop a ton of weight, your body's going to be shocked. It's going to be like, yo, something's fucked up. This person, like, I'm starving. And then what it's going to do as soon as you start eating more is it's going to hold on to as much of it as it can and start storing it as fat, because your body wants some reserve fuel, because the last thing it wants to do is run out of fat. And then if you run out of fat, the only other fuel source your body has is glycogen. And that's already gone. If your body's burned all its fat, your glycogen's gone in a survival situation. The next resource is your muscle mass. But your body does everything in its power to conserve any muscle mass you have. It does not want to eat your muscles because it knows how important they are, right? And your body's going to be indiscriminate about using your muscle breakdown. It could take muscle from your heart tissue to break down as food, right? It's not going to be like, well, Erik doesn't use his left foot as much, so I'm going to start breaking down the muscles in his left foot. Whatever's available, it's just going to slowly start deteriorating, right? Like you'll see whole body wasting. That includes, up to vital organs in some cases, which is terrifying.
Damn. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope, that just, you think about people like starving to death and how terrible that has to be.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And it's just like a slow, miserable death. Like there was a study done during World War II up in Minnesota. It's something starvation study. And like they'd never be able to do it today just because of ethical reasons. But essentially they imitated Holocaust camp scenarios. Man, I tell you what, it was something we never should have done, like ethically, but we got so much data out of it. It was like, whoa, just vast amounts of valuable data on human starvation. It's crazy. So that's where we get a lot of our malnutrition data from. I mean, obviously there's new updated data, but that was like a huge pivotal study.
Wow.
And those epigenetic studies too. A lot of those, the grandchildren of those survivors had a lot more obesity and had a lot more health conditions as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's like a gene from, I think it was from Holland too. Like there was a huge famine in the Netherlands, and people from their descendants have higher risk of obesity because of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are companies that do genetic tests that will show you what epigenetic markers you have and put you at risk for certain things. It's really cool. Yeah, the field of nutrition and epigenetics is huge. I don't do that with my clients because I just don't know enough about it. I think one day it would be really cool to incorporate into my practice, but as of right now, I don't do it. But it is fascinating, and there are places that do that.
The VA will do. They wanted me to go to this place called, it's a blood test, but they're
is it the Million Veteran Program where they map all your genes so they can see future?
Well, the specific lab was out of Stanford, and they call it pharmacogenomics, and they test your blood to see what drugs best metabolize in your system, so that they can apply better practices rather than just giving you, we're going to try this med, we're going to try this med. No, so they break it down to see what's most likely going to work with you.
Absolutely.
But I don't trust. I don't trust where that information is going, and not
I'm very hesitant to give my DNA out, because I'm still like, I'm conspiracy theorist. Erik's like, I'm going to run into a clone of myself one day that old Uncle Sam decided was.
They're trying to build the perfect soldier. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, bro. I'm like, I don't know about that.
I mean, it's already out there. China has been testing. They've already done it. I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who started one of those programs ended up dead, and that data is lost. But not only that, they still, we get into this topic too, but the CCP has already stolen millions of women's worth of DNA.
I believe it.
the bioengineered, weapons that can be created out of that are very, very specific. So it's a very real, real world threat, and it should be a real concern to see who has that information, just like your regular information. Not that it's not protected or anything like that. It's just there's a level of privacy that
I know the digital era is kind of a scary time to live, like I almost envy living a more primitive lifestyle off the grid, because it's just like
there's no going back though. There's no going back. There is no going back.
We're in it. We're in it for the long run. So you just got to adapt to it, and do your best to stay prepared.
Well, think about this, man. In maybe 2 years, we're going to be hanging out in the metaverse. We're going to be having podcasts in the metaverse.
That's crazy.
I don't want that. I don't want that, dude.
Hey, you know what?
I'm going to give you a big hug.
We'll have this meeting over a bonfire, and I'll bring some venison ribs to cook.
Yeah. We'll cook on the fire, dude. I'm down for that.
We'll retrograde.
Well, if you're in the Wilmington, North Carolina area, su casa es mi casa.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. Well, hey, likewise to you guys. If you're ever out in Wisconsin, I would love to meet up with you guys sometime. I mean, I've been planning to come out to the East Coast for a while. I've got some family in Connecticut. Obviously, Clint's out in the Carolinas. I've got some other friends out there. So me and my wife have been trying to plan like an East Coast road trip where we start up top and then work our way down.
Sick.
Yeah.
So, dude. Anytime if you're planning, we can try to link or whatnot. But so before Jose will make sure he puts all your contact in the Instagram post. But if you want to just say it in case somebody's not on there, how can somebody get a hold of you if they're wanting to work with you or
Absolutely. So the best place to reach me as it stands today is just through Instagram. Just follow Grunt Grub. The logo is a Apple hand grenade, right? M67 classic. So you can't miss it. And then obviously if you go to the page, it's not private, it's public. So you'll see all the posts. You'll see like a couple recipes, my nutrition for men advertisements, things like that. That's how you know it's me. But I am redesigning my website. So it was just gruntgrubrd.com. I'm changing it to grohmanndietetics.com. So I'm trying to have a big overarching company, and I want Grunt Grub just to be a facet of that because I want to branch out and help not just tactical athletes, but I'd like to help corporate men that work more behind a desk. I'd like to work with tradesmen, and that's going to branch into some different services. So right now it's still Grunt Grub, but my overarching company is going to be Grohmann Dietetics. So eventually the website will be grohmanndietetics.com. So just my last name, dietetics. But yeah, for right now, reach out to me on Instagram. If you're interested in a one-on-one, just DM me. Be like, hey, interested to hear about your prices, your programs, what you can do for me. And I'm happy to get back to you. So in terms of like random nutrition questions, if I don't have a lot of them in my DMs all at once, I'll definitely try my best to get back to you. But just out of respect to my paying clients, I try to limit my answers, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said, it's not a high paying career and I have a business to run. So I really try to respect the people that do take time to pay for my full courses to get that in-depth. But surface level nutrition questions, I'm always more than happy to answer, or at least point you in the right direction of where I'd look to get an answer.
Yeah, dude. Awesome. Yeah, I expected. I was telling Jose, I was like, this is going to be good, but like it was great.
This was so good, especially we get into some heavy issues, man, and sometimes they impact you on a different level. This was great.
I had a great talk with you guys. I mean, obviously we've been talking for more than 2 hours, so I appreciate you guys, letting me on here to run my suck for as long as we did, but I got out of it. Hopefully what you guys got out of it. It was a fun talk, and I hope we can stay in touch and keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, brother, for sure.
And if you guys, as time goes on, if you guys have some specific nutrition topics that you think would be really, beneficial for all of your listeners, let's say some new crash diet comes out next year and you're like, yo, we need to get somebody on here to like hash this all out. I'm always more than happy to come back on and talk more detailed in a specific subject.
Yeah, dude. Awesome. And two, in your research, if you come across something that's like, hey, the veteran community especially probably needs to know about this, or something
Absolutely.
to look out for, or something that, is trending with that's, who knows, a lot of GWAT guys are already dealing with health concerns. And if there's stuff that comes out through the weeds, that's like, hey, you guys watch out for this, or might want to go get checked for that, because
Absolutely.
Anyway.
And I do my best to post that stuff. So, I mean, obviously the easiest way, if I post it and you guys see me post about that, repost it, try to like get it into as many hands as possible.
Yeah.